Capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. It is Monday morning. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Pleasure to have your company, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or on your connected device. It's great for you to join us on one of those miserable days. It doesn't feel very spring-like today, does it? But we hope to keep you some cheer and some sunlight as we talk about all of the biggest stories of the day. Lots of top guests coming. Coming up in this hour in particular, going to be talking about the Chancellor Rachel Reeves axing up to, we're told, 50,000 civil service jobs. And there's talk about 10,000 civil service jobs. I'd go for more than that, but that's just me. Slashing £2 billion from government running costs in her spring statement this week. Guess what, though? Public sector unions aren't happy. I know. I'm as surprised as you are. Meanwhile, the Chancellor has reignited once again the freebie row as she defended accepting two £600 seats in a corporate box at a Sabrina Carpenter concert this month on security grounds. Yeah, that's the line they're going to keep taking, isn't it? But the Treasury has admitted that illegal migrants will be housed in hotels and other temporary accommodation for years to come, despite a very clear Labour election pledge to end that policy. And the Chief Executive of National Grid has said that Heathrow Airport did have enough power from other substations to avoid shutting down on Friday, which impacted some 200,000 passengers and frankly was a national embarrassment. Although, once again, when we do have these problems, at least it exposes just how unbelievably vulnerable our critical infrastructure is. So maybe something good will come of it. We'll talk about all of that coming up. Plenty more besides. Later in the show, we're going to be talking about Ukraine. We're going to talk to a former national security advisor and former US ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, about the latest peace talks in Riyadh. It'll be interesting to get his take on the Trump special envoy, Steve Witkoff, who's a lot of criticism of him over the weekend because basically he's spouting Kremlin talking lines. I'm getting the impression this golfing buddy of Donald Trump seems to know nothing more about Ukraine than what he's read on social media, which is a little bit of a worry, don't you think? Also going to be talking about what happened 5 years ago yesterday. That was, of course, the announcement of the first of 3 lockdowns here in the UK by Boris Johnson. Going to be talking to my good friend and Telegraph journalist Alison Pearson about the impact of that. because as much as I don't want to talk about it, I want to forget about it, we still today are not learning the lessons. Anyway, all of that coming up, and I'm delighted to say joining me throughout the entire show is commentator Sam Armstrong. Good Monday morning to you once again.
Good morning.
Always good. You're very chirpy. It's good. I love having a chirpy guest in the studio.
Well, with the weather as it is today outside, I think we need to make up for it.
Just for you, if you don't know, our studio is on the 17th floor of Talk Towers, as we like to call it. I don't think the rest of the building call it that, but we do. And with the most magnificent views. One of the things I do miss moving off the breakfast show is the extraordinary sunrises that we got to enjoy. And it is an amazing view. We can see Tower of London, we can see Tower Bridge, we can see in the distance Canary Wharf. It's absolutely stunning. Today is just a bit foggy, misty misery. But anyway, hoping we will, cheer you up nevertheless, wherever you are today. Let's talk about the spring statement. Not feeling spring in her step today, Rachel Reeves, utterly pointlessly. I mean, it actually really gets my goat when chancellors do the Sunday morning round the week of either a budget or a spring statement. The Tories are calling this an emergency budget, which to a certain extent it is, because, things have got worse, largely due to the events of the last budget by the Labour Party. But utterly pointlessly saying, well, I can't tell you what's going to be happening on Wednesday. Well, then don't sodding well bother doing telly and wasting our time. Why don't you do the interview on the Sunday afterwards so we can then have some analysis when we've seen all the figures? But lots of talk about a £2 billion budget cut, sort of a 15% cut off, but sort of backroom spending, kind of Doge-like, Elon Musk-like spending cuts. We're told some 10,000 civil service job cuts it could mean. Unions are saying it could be 50,000. I would say neither of those figures is big enough. But what do you make of that? Yeah, well, the first thing to say about the civil service is it has ballooned in recent years. When the Tories first came into power with the Lib Dems in 2010, they began to cut how it had grown under Gordon Brown's administration. But basically, once we went into the Brexit referendum and the COVID, we added about 100,000 positions to the civil service, none of which have been cut, all of which have been placed on a sort of permanent footing. And now the moment we try and deal with 10% of those, 10,000 jobs, howls of outrage. So we still won't go back to where before. And of course, added loads more people post-lockdown or lockdown almost. But again, we have more people, paid more, doing less, many working from home, and we have worse services. It doesn't add up, does it? It just simply doesn't add up. It's jobs for the boys. Yeah, well, this is it, right? I don't think anyone would mind, right, if you felt like you were getting a GP appointment that day, if you felt like the schools were getting better, that our armed forces were more prepared, were ready. But you go through the list of government achievements over the last few years, and this isn't political, right? Just, is the government doing its basic job? Is the civil service functioning? And it's fail. And yet, as you say, pay rises, promotions, more jobs, bigger offices. Or gold-plated pensions as well. It's all right for those in Whitehall. And while the rest of us who are forced to pay for all of this keep getting squeezed to the pips. I have to say, and that's what this budget is for having to deal with. And this thing, and the reality is, again, with so much of what we're going to be hearing in the spring statement on Wednesday, goodness me, we're going to be talking about it an awful lot, don't we? We won't take it live. We'll analyse it live as it happens, but we won't force you to listen to it because, again, I like you too much. But this is basically going to be dealing with the fallout from the autumn statement, which just has been catastrophic for the economy, given that the number one aim of the Labour Party when they were running for the election was growth. We're going to achieve all the things we want to do. We're not going to have to put individual working families' taxes up, but we're going to get growth. Well, there ain't no growth. We've had a downgrading of the forecasts by half for this year. And again, those forecasts are nearly always wrong, but they're often wrong in a more optimistic way than the other way round. We are seeing, what a surprise. You put taxes up on business like the employer's national insurance and other taxes and other costs, minimum wage going up. Again, that's great for people on minimum wage, but fundamentally, can a company, kind of business afford that? And businesses are closing down. They are stopping hiring. We have seen a huge number of businesses close down in the last year or so. Something like just that tens of thousands. We now know that the average price of a pint in Britain is going to hit £5 for the first time in a few weeks. £5, and that is directly because of landlords who couldn't make it. They were closed down. They couldn't make a profit for years because of lockdown. Even when they were allowed to reopen, they couldn't make a profit because they were limited number of people they could have in and the like. And people haven't come back on the same basis. They are absolutely struggling. All of the extra costs they've been hit with, and they've got no sort of basic sort of backup buffer in terms of their finances, because that's all gone during the lockdown. They're having to pass the prices on, and of course the more the price goes up, the more people don't go to the pub, and it's a downward spiral. And yet again, pubs aren't just another business over there. Pubs are often the lifeblood of a local community. Yep. They're really important for a lot of people who don't have a network of friends and family through work and the like. This has been an absolute disaster. Do you have any hope that anything that the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, will announce on Wednesday that will basically backtrack on those terrible decisions and improve the economy, or do you think she's going to double down?
Well, the worst thing to say about them, of course, is actually those national insurance rises haven't even hit yet, right? Yeah. All of the damage we are seeing now is people panicking in advance. The worst is yet to come. You ain't seen nothing yet. And look, prices are going up through the roof, and that is why I think the Bank of England has had to slow down the rate at which it's bringing down interest rates, because it can see that the government, the way they've imposed taxes has hit those parts of the economy that go directly onto people's pocket. And you're absolutely right to highlight pubs. I mean, I was cheering to myself the other day when I managed to find a pint for less than £7 in London. I mean,
London, £5 would be like, oh, that's a cheap pint. Yeah.
Look, I tell you what,
I have a teenager, so I know where all the cheap pints.
If anyone knows where you can get a decent £5 pint in London, please call in, because
seriously, genuinely, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call in.
Yes, Julia and I, it's fair to say, do like a pint. So
I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, to be fair, I'm more a glasses sort of girl, but if it is a good indicator. No, but it is a big factor, and it's a factor in people's quality of life. We're not supposed to be surviving. We're supposed to be thriving. We're supposed to be having a good life. We're supposed to be a first world country.
Well, there is one person, of course, who is thriving on the back of.
Well, very nice to see what he did there. Rachel Reeves has had to defend once again the reopening of Freebiegate. What a surprise! She has defended taking 2 free tickets. She keeps saying a member of my family as a daughter. She took a daughter to a Sabrina Carpenter gig. No, me neither. Big hit, Espresso, big hit. So well done. But apparently these tickets are just simply not available to the general public, let alone the Chancellor. But she got given freebie tickets in a box. They were £600 each. She said they couldn't buy these tickets, she pointed out in an interview yesterday, which is like, well, we could have bought other tickets. But she accepted them, she says, for security reasons. And this is the line that Keir Starmer used about being in the box at Emirates. Even though plenty of prime ministers, plenty of have sat in football, in the normal stands, have sat everywhere. The idea that she can't, incognito, with a bobble hat on, go to Sabrina Carpenter concert is for the birds.
Yeah, and look, right, let's be very clear. This woman makes 6 figures a year, right? She can fork out £1,300 for her own tickets. I mean, Sabrina Carpenter's big song last year was Please, Please, Please. And you can only imagine
I love that you looked that up.
Only imagine her begging, and we don't know who this donor is yet. Somebody has given her these tickets. Now, what do they expect in return?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. This is the thing. I mean, people get, there is a world in which people get offered freebies, and thank you very much indeed. But my thing is, even in my job, I am required to declare anything that could impact how I would talk about the show. I've been offered a number of trips, for instance, to Israel. Okay, and just sort of, fact-finding trips, journalistic trips, not sort of hey, we want to reward you for being supportive of Israel. Not, because I know that's what people are going to say. But I have declined those, partly because, again, I can't do my show at the same time as doing those sort of trips. But mainly, crucially, I don't want to accept anything that anyone could ever say to me, yeah, but you got a free flight and a free trip or a free hotel while you were on this fact-finding mission, or whatever, and that has impacted how you talk about this subject. Never a penny, because it's so important to me that I know that I have integrity. So I find it really main thing, and I was just saying to Mike about this, the main thing about these freebies for me is, do I really care whether or not Rachel Reeves takes her daughter to a pop concert or not? Well, not really. Does it make any difference to my life? Well, no, not really. I think she should spend her own money. She's high earner, so is her husband. Mike was just saying they're a combined salary of 370 grand. I think they can probably afford to buy some tickets, which are probably still available for that concert on all the ticket websites, and pay a few £100 for them. But she doesn't, because they want a freebie, and they think that it's a L'Oreal defence. I'm worth it. But it's the lack of good judgment that makes me question. Why do they think that when you're making a load of cuts, I agree with those cuts, I think the welfare cuts don't go far enough, but why do they think you can't be cutting winter fuel payments for poor pensioners and then taking freebies worth 600 quid? You just, do they not understand that here's my thing, do they know we can see them? Do they know that?
Would Julia, it's actually worse than that, because they do know we can see them, because for 5 years they were whinging and whining every time the Tory party politicians did exactly the same thing. They accused them of corruption, all sorts, every name under the sun. Yeah. Do you know what? Like, fair enough. But they've walked in here into government and they have been deliberately hypocritical. They think they are sitting there cosy, rosy. It's their turn. It's their time.
We're different from them.
They just don't care that they're getting criticised, because they don't believe that the opposition to this government is going to be sufficient to get themselves kicked out.
So
this
they can
is a
get away with it.
that thinks it's walking into 2 terms guaranteed.
But again, I think the Shadow Business Secretary, Andrew Griffiths, is crazy to have taken that the freebie to Davos, the ski trip. It's a parliamentary ski trip, wasn't taking it with his family or anything. But again, it's just misjudgment on MPs' parts. I just think they really need to read the room. And I'm not one of those people who goes, oh, they should live on minimum wage or anything like that. But read the room, guys. People are struggling. I want to ask you about this, because it's a combination of the two stories, isn't it? It's Chancellor H. Reeves set to cut public spending and civil service jobs this week, but she's defended accepting 2 freebie £600 concert tickets for herself. I want to know your reaction to that. Does freebie gate still bother you? I mean, again, it just shows to me how utterly out of touch these people are with ordinary people's lives, your and mine lives. What is your reaction? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Don't forget, of course, that calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. But, if you don't want to talk about just the freebie issue to it, really, with the spring statement, what do you expect to hear? Because if it is 50,000 or 10,000 civil service job cuts, a £2 billion budget cut to Whitehall, is that too much? Is that going too far, or is it actually just not enough, as we had with the welfare reforms last week? Just doesn't touch the size of what really needs to be done. I'd love to hear from you. As I say, the number 0344 499 1000. Let's also just talk, before we go to a break, about Heathrow. Fascinating interjection from the chief executive of the National Grid this morning in the Financial Times. This is John Pettigrew. He spoke for the first time since that fire at electricity substation led to epic long closure at Heathrow Airport, the busiest airport in the world. And he said, though, Heathrow Airport did have enough power to continue operating, certainly to continue restart again much quicker than it did. 200,000 passengers affected. I would say national embarrassment, frankly, more than anything else. We've now learned that numerous other major airports around the world do actually have more backup power to make sure they can keep operating because of the long-term impact and the huge cost of this. But he said, basically, there were 2 other substations. You could have got power from those, and it's a matter of reconfiguring everything. The Transport Secretary has now, she's been out there busy on a media round today, but she's instigated an investigation into this and looking into what's really going on. But it sounds to me just like inept management, doesn't it? Yeah, and you can only imagine that there was some sort of health and safety manager, some middle safely rebooted, pen-pushing, paper-shuffling official that was sat there and just said no, 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 no. Yeah. And look, nobody ever thinks about the passengers, but it's hugely damaging, actually, I think, to Heathrow as a business. This is an airport that was once one of the global hubs for international aviation. So many flights came via Heathrow. Increasingly, that has moved out, based at Schiphol in Amsterdam, and indeed out to countries in the Gulf. Why? Well, for 2 reasons. Firstly, I think it's a national embarrassment that we haven't been able to build a 3rd runway for 20 years and the rest, plus. 50. And secondly, because there has been a total lack of investment, total lack of product delivered for the customer, which means it's just a drastically more pleasant experience to travel around the Gulf airports than it is a British airport. I mean that's the thing. And again, also so many people being basically redirected to European, continental destinations, to Ireland, to Glasgow. When people listening to some people on the radio who's talking about being diverted to Glasgow because the other London airports, particularly Gatwick Airport, operate at such high capacity they don't have any spare room for any extra flights. We've got this. We have so many. it's like our hospitals, our airports, trains, everything runs at just breaking point capacity. We have no room for manoeuvre when things go wrong. It's just not a way to run a first world country. It just doesn't work. We need to have the backups, and it just shows also how our critical infrastructure is so vulnerable and so at risk. So what? Someone would just have to go and firebomb a substation and they can take out an entire airport.
Every single service in this country, every single part of the government is creaking.
Yeah.
It's almost as if we have accidentally imported millions of people to the same level of services in this country without noticing over the past 15, 20, 25 years, and haven't built everything that comes with it. Because look, never forget, every new migrant, they don't come with another mile of road, they don't come with another hospital bed, they don't come
or
with
a water reservoir, or the extra nuclear power. Again, it is extraordinary, isn't it? And these are the people in charge who are supposed, they're the experts. Remember, they're the experts. We're just people whinging about the price of a pint. That's all we are. We don't understand anything, except most of us understand it all an awful lot better than they do, it would appear. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. You want to get in touch about Heathrow, you want to get in touch about the freebie gate, the spring statement, what you're expecting to hear, what you're worried about, the price of a pint. If you do have your suggestions where you could buy a decent pint for under a fiver, certainly in London, love to hear your calls. 0344. Let's consider it public service broadcasting at its best. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
It's up to the Brits. We've got MAGA, we've got America First here. You had Brexit in the UK. We're seeing this across Europe, where, whether it's Prime Minister Maloney or whether it's Modi on the Indian subcontinent. People are starting to say enough is enough. We would like to have our countries back. Borders matter. Sovereignty matters.
Absolutely. How come aren't doing that? They're trashing our heroes. They took all their pictures out and put the head of communist parties in and pictures of themselves in.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:24 is the time. Delighted to say Sam Armstrong is still with me throughout the show, and lots of calls coming in from you on both the spring statement coming up on Wednesday and the decision. Obviously, we're expecting spending to be cut, particularly on backroom staff, on possibly, we're told by the union, some 50,000 civil service staff. I say yay to that, although you know perfectly well they won't cut middle managers. They'll end up cutting the people, who are actually doing an actual useful job that we benefit from. But I want want to know how you feel about that, as the Chancellor herself defends accepting 2 freebie £600 concert tickets for her and her daughter on the security grounds, because apparently she just simply can't go anywhere at all. I mean, does she not do her own shopping? I wonder, does she go to her local supermarket? Does she not live a normal life at all? Because it seems to me that if she's that worried about security, she wouldn't be sitting even in a box at a concert, would she? I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Let's get some of your texts and tweets coming in. Clive says, I worked for the government for years and taking freebies was a huge no-no. Don't see any reason why it should be different for the Chancellor. Exactly, Clive. I mean, again, when we've had the whole freebie gate issue, we've seen, so many police officers and others just saying, we're not allowed to take freebies because it would lead to question marks about our honesty. Spencer says the leaders lead from the front, meaning they place themselves under the same restrictions. Labour aren't leaders. Fred said, never mind concerts, we should all chip in and get her on a business and economics course. Fred, I'm loving that. I mean, Sam, that is the harsh thing. Less time at pop concerts with your daughter, more time doing economics 101 and understanding that if you put taxes up on business, it might not lead to growth.
Yeah, and actually some basic media training. I did listen to her over
so
the weekend.
painful.
She's so... I don't mean this in a bad way, but she is the most boring person in British politics.
You've not met Keir Starmer?
Oh, she is...
At least Angie Rayner's a laugh.
Angela Rayner's
when she's not on a safari, or trying to go on a safari when she's on holiday.
There are actually some good performers in Labour. Why do they have the worst, most boring
Because she was an economist for 10
Chancellor?
years at the Bank of England and a senior economist at HBOS as well. Did you not know that? Did you not get that memo? I'm just saying.
I did hear something about
I'm
that.
just saying. There was something. I'm sure there was in the news about that. Pete says, champagne socialism at its best. And Robin says, self-serving hypocrites. Politicians do what they do. It's one of the reasons why voter apathy leads to such clowns getting into office. Nailed it. Every single one of those messages. Nailed it. Thank you so much. Let's go to the phone lines. As I say, 0344 499 1000. Adrian is in Perth and wants to have his say. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia. How are you?
Very well indeed. All the better for talking to you. What do you want to say?
Julia, I'm a similar generation to you, about 5 years older than you.
So about mid-20s?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not wearing as well as you. I haven't. You haven't got any crow feet, whereas I look like an ordnance survey map. But what I wanted to say to you, I was brought up in an era, and I always remember when I was probably about 10, I found a £10 note on the floor.
Yeah.
And I was so happy. I took it back to my mother and I said, I'm going to get a Hornby train. And she said, no, you're not. And she took me down to the police station and I handed it in. And I had to wait 3 months. And I got it. And then I got my...
Because no one claimed it, so, yeah.
But the other thing was, I always remember I won a raffle once. And I was a kid. And my parents said, we're not going to tell you what to do, but I suggest you donate it back to the charity it came from.
Oh, God.
And from then on, I had everything I won. I'm not trying to play the moral high ground, but it's just my moral values.
Yeah.
If I was to win something or be given something, unless it was really,
share it out to people who need it more than you. So are you saying that Rachel Reeves, when she got given these concert tickets, should have given them to, people who deserved it more? I mean, not the thing is, the people who gave them to her, they wanted Rachel Reeves there because they want to be able to have a quiet word in her ear. They don't want, you or me there. We're no use to them.
I can't understand the IQ level of these people.
I know.
Because they could actually have gone along to a children's charity and said, look, we've been donated these 2 tickets. Could you use them for young mothers or anything?
Yeah.
And it would have been really good publicity. But instead it just seems take. And I really don't know where the moral value of this country is.
I couldn't agree with you more, but I say, what parenting by Adrian's parents? Harsh, but very... But hey, you sleep at night. I think it's one of those things, you need to always know that you've done the right thing. Adrian, so appreciate that. Thank you very much indeed. Let's talk to Robert now. He's in Hertfordshire. Hello, Robert.
Hi, Julia. Before I go on to my points, I want to talk about Rachel Reeves and Starmer, but going back to her voice, it's like one of those self-help voices, isn't it? Like they put you into a coma. I want you to sit back
I mean, I don't want it to be personal. And again, everyone always says, oh, she gets so much more criticism than a man would. This is absolute nonsense. There's always criticism of every politician. You go with the stuff and you notice. I mean, I find her and Starmer both intolerable to listen to. I'm sorry, I do.
I'll be honest with you. I can say this, but you can't. If you weren't looking at her, you would think she was transgender. The way she talks. I know you can't say it, but I've just said it.
You have just said it. You just don't think. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna leave that as a comment Robert has made, not me. But but people have visceral reactions to people who make decisions which affect their lives. What do you want to say on the substantial matter of the budget of the statement?
The 10,000 redundancies is just insulting people's intelligence. It's pie in the sky. You imagine that's 10,000 redundancies they've got to pay out.
Yeah.
And then once the Marxist-run unions get old and going, you're going to have miserable strikes. I'll tell you why she's done it. It's because the May elections are coming up. Well, for some councils, not all councils, but it's just pie in the sky. And
not going to happen.
If I could just say one thing about statesman Starmer, and this coalition of some are more willing than others, which don't include Germany, and it don't include. It's a dangerous game he's playing. But the only reason he's been allowed to puff his chest out is because of Brexit. So Brexit has helped him. He's in a unique position. He don't have to listen to the EU. And he's using that, and he's fooling the people. It's thanks to Brexit. It's thanks to Brexit that he's been allowed to do.
That's a very good point, Robert. I really appreciate that. Although, of course, our security and defence stuff was always something that was only for our country, but we know how much those countries do try to stick together as one unit on those issues. Robert, so appreciate your call. Thank you so much. 10:31 is the time. Going to take a very quick break in a moment. We're going to be talking to Lord Craig McKinley about what we expect from the spring budget. First up, though, it is time to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning Oasis tickets at Wembley. This isn't Sabrina Carpenter with Rachel Reeves in a box, but they're Oasis tickets for you at Wembley this summer.
How do you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
Good luck with that competition. You don't want to miss out. £10,000 and Oasis tickets. 10:33 is the time. We'll take a quick break. Up next, Craig McKinley. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong still with me. Delighted to be joined now by Lord McKinley. Craig McKinley is a Conservative former Conservative MP, of course, and a voice of, I would like to say, pretty much on every sensible issue in recent years. Very, very good morning to you, Craig.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. What do you make of what we think we know so far about what's going to happen in the spring statement? To talk about the actual, nitty-gritty stuff about we're going to get an Office Budget Responsibility Report, which we understand is not going to look good in terms of the government finances. We're going to be told there need to be more spending cuts because there's been an extra cost of borrowing. And we're told a lot of those spending cuts are going to come from cutting the budget in the civil service, cutting civil service jobs. Do you think that is the right choice for Rachel Reeves, if that is what she does?
Well, there's very few avenues left to her. The rate of growth just keeps getting trimmed and trimmed and trimmed. And the forecast which underpinned the budget in, late October last year, was predicated on a rate of growth. That has now disintegrated because of that failed, dreadful budget which put up tax on employing people with extra NIC. So the figures are looking very bad. The headroom has gone. So the only place left, well, there's two places left you can go. You can tax a bit more. But I think, as they say, the pips are squeaking and extra tax just increases the decline. As Churchill always said, you can't lift yourself up by standing in a bucket, or words to that effect. So, yeah, I think the tax avenue is closed, but I wouldn't be surprised. Now, here's my little tax forecast, if there is one kicking around. There might be a squeeze up of, I think, tax on fuel duty, because that's turnkey, very easy to collect out of very few suppliers. So if there is going to be a tax rise, that's the one I would guess. But
although that would be one that would hit every single, pretty much every single household in the country, everything we buy, and every single business as well. But, and again, that would be a class. To be honest with you, I think you're probably right, because that would be a classic mistake by Rachel Reeves, because she didn't think that putting a tax on jobs would be a problem. I
mean, when has this government ever come up with anything that's sensible? So yeah, in terms of a very unsensible but very effective tax rise,
that might be
what I would do if you had to have one.
Yeah, but this is the interesting thing. So much about this spring statement, lots of people are calling it an emergency budget, but this spring statement is basically having to deal with the fallout from what was announced in the last budget, which had a massive impact on employment, on businesses, on business confidence, and the impact of that has meant that we are going to be seeing more problems in the future. Now, as was often the case, there are lots of polls saying people would rather see tax rises than spending cuts. According to one poll, they would rather see spending cuts rather than tax rises, according to another. But even the people who said they'd rather see tax rises, they tend to be people who think there should be tax rises on other people. Like when Jeremy Corbyn was proposing this, when he stood for election twice as Prime Minister, he wasn't proposing to tax, the average voter in the street. He was claiming he was going to tax the top 5%. Again, they're already paying pretty much, on the top 5% paying pretty much like sort of 10% of all tax. I mean, 30% or something. 30% of all taxes is paid by the top 1%. So I'm not quite sure how much more the top people can be squeezed. So do you think that in terms of this, that actually voters are on board with the idea that we're going to have to cut the state?
I think what we've seen so far has just been such a recipe of disaster. I mean, you had the budget that we mentioned, the tax on jobs. You've got the IHT changes to family companies and farms. So the family company owners starting to think, do you know what? What's the point? What's the point in working harder, creating a business for the future? So they've taken their foot off the gas. Not at all. I quite understand that. You've been talking down the economy, obviously, for the first 3 or 4 months of their regime. And we've yet to have the Employment Rights Bill, which will make employers think even further about whether to increase their workforce. So, put all that in the background, you have got an economy that is not performing. So the only place left, if you're not prepared to tax more, is by cutting the size of the state. Now, that is a good thing. That has to be a good thing. We've increased the number of civil servants since 2016 by 135,000. There's now just over 500,000.
Well, why did that happen? I mean, they couldn't have all been working in the Brexit department.
Well, the argument is, of course, yes, we had to do Brexit and then you had COVID, so we need a lot of more staff to tell us all what to do during those COVID lockdown times. But that's me being facetious. But one wonders what on earth these extra 130-odd thousand people actually do. Yep. So I would say they're doing a zero-sum game where they're actually not creating anything good, particularly for the country. They're bright people. They're obviously bright people. I think they would be better served in the productive side of the economy, yep, out in business, creating jobs, doing good stuff.
Well, again, if those extra 135,000 people were doing a great job and helping the economy and helping people, we would have a booming economy and the country would have wonderful public services, and we have neither.
Well, and possibly we wouldn't need to import that 130,000 people either, because we'd have job substitution in the UK. But perhaps I'm verging into the facetious a little. But
yeah, indeed.
Cutting the size of the state has to be a good thing. And perhaps it's moments like these that we do have a slight change of path. Well, but I think the numbers they're talking about 50,000 potential civil servants going. We've increased the number by over 130,000. So why isn't the number 130,000?
Yeah. That said, again, and I have to say this to you, and I know you didn't agree with any of this, but, it's all happened under the Tory watch.
I'm afraid it did, Julia. I'm afraid it did. I mean, I rejoiced, as I'm sure many people did, when Jacob Rees-Mogg at the time in that position was going to visit various departments and saying, sorry, I missed you. Yep. Hopefully you'll be at your desk next week. Yeah. But there's some tough things we've got to discuss in this country. Yeah. That our economy is no longer big enough, tough enough, productive enough to actually generate the promises that we've all offered people for so many years. And where this Labour government touched, and I say barely touched, the DWP last week, focusing on the disabled, I think the focus should be far wider on the general number of people who are simply not looking properly.
Absolutely. I mean, again, this is my thing, is there's going to be a big fuss about everything. The unions and the left are all going to be up in arms, and the usual hand-wringing backbench Labour MPs will say what they want to say. But we're not actually going to get to grips with any of this, as the previous government did.
Just focus on those sort of tax things. I mean, last week, Diane Abbott, love her dearly, and I really do, lovely woman. I've been on many shows with them. We get on famously well. But she came up with this 2% tax on people who've got over 10 million of assets. Yeah. Of course, lovely. Who wouldn't vote for that? Because if I haven't got 10 million pounds,
what do I care? Yeah.
Again, it's a tax on other people. But those other people will suddenly decide, do you know what, Portugal with a peachy tax deal now looks rather attractive. I can go anywhere in the world and have a lower tax bill, perhaps avoid IHT completely. I'm out of here.
Yeah, I mean, the people, and again, and we know that because every time a country has done this, brought in any sort of wealth tax,
we're good at exports at the moment. We're very good at exports at the moment. We're exporting millionaires at the second highest rate of any other country in the world.
Yeah, and again,
number two.
I always have this thing with people. People talk about, but they don't deserve their money. Well, you know what? If it was so easy to become a millionaire or a billionaire, we'd all be one, and we're not. I wonder why. But anyway, I want to go on to one other topic with you as well, quickly, migrants. The Treasury has admitted in a document published by the Office for Value for Money, LOL, that the global instability meant the use of hotels for illegal migrants will continue. So basically, for years to come, Labour got elected. One of the things they said, we're not stop the boats, we're going to smash the gangs, but we're also going to get all these people out of hotels because it's costing a fortune. No, they're going to carry on using them for years to come. What a surprise, eh?
Well, no, I'm not surprised at all. I mean, we've had 5,000 new illegal migrants coming cross-channel this year alone, and the rate of them going out the other side, either being returned, is not being...
it has gone up.
It has gone up. I was going to say, to their credit, they've actually increased it from where we left it. But my worry is, Julia, to get people out of hotels, the turnkey they will use is simply to give them a yes to their asylum application that much quicker. Yeah. And then the cost won't be any less, but they will then fall on local councils to be housed, and they'll be receiving universal credit. Yeah. But of course, they won't be figuring in a refugee cost. It'll just be a
But either way, with the taxpayers still paying for that. Just finally, I want to ask you about, just going back to Rachel Reeves, this freebie gate yet again. I mean, yet another freebie set of concert tickets, 600 quid tickets to a Sabrina Carpenter gig in a box. The Chancellor has defended this basically for security reasons. It's better for her to take these tickets, be in a box rather than, with hoi polloi like us. I mean, at the same time, we've learned that the Shadow Business Secretary, one of your lot, the Tory Andrew Griffiths, he accepted a Davos ski pass. Those, by the way, are $250 a day, and BAFTA tickets. I don't mind him going to BAFTA. He's the Shadow Business Secretary. BAFTA's part of a massive big business in Britain. I don't have an issue with that. But it's reading the room, isn't it? It's politicians, whether they are Labour or Tory, but certainly a Labour Chancellor making cuts to, winter fuel payments for low-income pensioners and cutting benefits, although I'd agree with it, but let's face it, there'll be some people who'll be hit who we don't want hit because that's how incompetent our system is, taking a massive freebie from we don't even know who when she's on a massive salary herself, could afford to buy the tickets herself. What does that tell you?
Well, one thing, Julia, there is only you and I on this call, isn't there?
Absolutely. No one's listening.
I don't know who Sabrina Carpenter is.
Fair enough.
If I was offered a ticket, I wouldn't go. But no, what I think annoys people, I know I've got no objection to. I mean, I sort of was one, and I did go to the odd concert, and it was all properly declared. I didn't mind any of that. What I do mind from Rachel Reeves is the rank hypocrisy of it. When they were holding us up in government as my ministers using the corporate jet to go here, there, and everywhere. This lot are doing it times 10. Yeah. And they were moaning about the freebie trips, and here they are, this lot getting new clothes, glasses, concert tickets here, there, and everywhere. Now, I don't mind any of this, frankly, but yes, it doesn't look good when the rest of the
it really isn't. I'd like some free glasses. I managed to chip my glasses. I'd love a new. If anyone would like to send me a new pair of glasses, that would be fantastic. Well,
I'm pleased to say these are glasses direct, about 50 quid. These
there you are, perfect. There you go. I mean, I'm just thinking with Lord Ali. Hello. It's just if you could just buy me a new pair of glasses. Apparently, Sama's glasses cost hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. But there we are. Lord McKinley, always so good to talk to you. Conservative pick, Craig McKinley there. Sam Armstrong, just a quick word from you. Just on, and let's come back just to the freebie hypocrisy. That is the key thing for a lot of people, isn't it? It's just Labour talked a good game on this. But as soon as they're in office, freebie galore. And we had Angela Rayner, hilariously, on a trip to Ethiopia, saying, could I also go on safari? Now, she didn't end up going on safari. It's like, no, Minister, you're on a work official trip. You're not going off for a day's safari.
Yeah, and that's the crucial point. She didn't go on the safari because her officials, her civil servants, turned around to her and said, no, do you know what? It would be totally and utterly inappropriate to have the taxpayer pay to fly you out to Ethiopia to go on a trip that no one quite understands why the local government minister is going on in the first place. And then for you to choose to divert all of the officials that are there on our expense getting paid and your security in order to go on a holiday. The taxpayer is not responsible for paying for your holiday, Mrs. Rayner. And I don't care how much you think you deserve it. I don't care how well you've done. Look, you have come a long way from where you are. But you know what? You don't get there and then use our money to keep yourself in the lifestyle.
All of these people are paid more than enough to be able to afford these things themselves. 10:48 is the time. Up next, we're going to talk about Heathrow closure. Did Heathrow actually have access to enough power that they could have kept open and didn't actually end up diverting the flights for 200,000 people? We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
Breaking news now. Harrods has proposed a 6-figure payout to victims of the abuse by Mohammed Fayed. The London department store is close to finalising compensation payments, potentially worth more than £300,000 to those who endured sexual abuse by its former owner, Mohammed Fayed. Just a quick reaction, actually, Scarlett. You're welcoming this.
Yeah, great. I mean, what he did was disgusting, and it's really good that there's some compensation because he intimidated and assaulted young women.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. 10:52, it's just coming up to on Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong's still here, and I'm delighted to say on the phone, for some reason, I think he's had a Heathrow-style power outage on video. Rupert Darwell, the author of Green Tyranny, joins us. A very, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia. Good to be joining you.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. And really always we have a problem with some sort of tech problem where we're talking about something to do with tech, but that really is what we're talking about, really, when we're talking about the Heathrow power outage on Friday. Now, this was, of course, not due to mad net zero policies, we think. You know, it was due to massive fire at one of the substations in the area. But we've learnt today, in an interview with the Financial Times, John Pettigrew, who is the chief executive of the National Grid, he claims that Heathrow Airport did have enough power to avoid shutting down on Friday. There are 2 other substations, and certainly one of them would have been enough to power Heathrow, and they didn't need to shut down. So Heathrow said they did need to. The Transport Secretary doesn't seem to know either way. The National Grid said they didn't. Who do you believe?
Well, I thought the most interesting, the giveaway was from the Heathrow chief executive, Thomas Waldby, who said that everything worked as it should. Well, clearly it didn't. I mean, that is the absolute giveaway. In his mind, shutting down the airport because of a power interruption was everything working as it should. Yeah. Now, other airports don't shut down when they have a power interruption, so this is not the way it should be.
And it was 200,000 passengers were affected. Their flights were cancelled or diverted, you know, to hundreds of miles away or delayed. And, I mean, people were, you know, although flights started again on Friday afternoon and evening, loads of people would have missed out on a business trip or a weekend away or a holiday.
Yeah, I think there are 2 issues here that are quite alarming. The first is that Heathrow prioritises so-called sustainability over resiliency, right? And so
what is that? What's that in English?
What that means is that if you go to Heathrow, they'll say we're 100% renewable power. They have a wood chip burner to keep the Terminal 2 and 5 warm and powered up. So they prioritise sustainability over keeping the airport functioning, resilience.
Which is what most of us would probably prefer. So did they, I mean, other airports we've learned over the weekend around the world do actually have, you know, generators and backup sources, because the cost of diverting all those flights, putting people in hotels, goodness knows what, is in the hundreds of millions. So they have backup generators to make sure that they can function no matter what. But Heathrow apparently doesn't.
Well, that you've put your finger on it. You talk about the cost of shutting down the airport. The key thing is the cost is borne by customers, passengers and airlines, not by the airport. And fundamentally, the way Heathrow is regulated is as a passive toll collector, right? Every time a passenger goes through the airport or an airline lands, the toll clicks up. They get more money. So essentially their role is really quite passive, and they are not incentivized, i.e. they don't pay a cost if they don't provide a resilient service.
Wait a minute, but I mean, lots of people, their travel insurance will cover, or you know, this wasn't an act of God, you know, so they're getting compensation, well, not compensation, but they certainly from the airlines, but they would be getting, you know, the cost of another flight if they needed one, or their money back. But can't the airlines sue the airport to say, you didn't have resilience, you failed to provide the service, and we're now massively out of pocket. And I would wonder if their own insurers were going to sue Heathrow's insurers.
I'm afraid that is the big problem, that Heathrow is a regulated airport by the Civil Aviation Authority, and as I say, its income comes from as a toll collector and as a retailer, and not from running a reliable, efficient, on-time airport, which is what most people want.
That's all we're looking at. I've never looked for an airport customer experience. I just want to arrive and get on the plane as soon as possible with minimum queuing and faffing. But this is the thing. So, well, I mean, when they're going for environmental sustainability as opposed to having the backup, does that mean that they've not got, for instance, the diesel generators? I mean, because Heathrow is the size of a small town. It's not like powering a small shopping centre, is it?
Well, as someone pointed out, that there are quite a few data centres in that area, and they managed to keep. They didn't go dark, unlike Heathrow. So yes, it is technically possible to switch supplies when one transformer goes down, to switch supplies and to keep the airport light. And the issue is that Heathrow will say, well, we met the regulations, the safety regulations in terms of electricity supply, but actually they're not meeting a higher standard, which is actually to be safe and reliable. I mean, people want reliability and resilience.
I mean, it was a national embarrassment, was it not, that our airport can't cope with it, but also the fact that our infrastructure is so vulnerable, and we know so many parts of our national infrastructure is very vulnerable to cyber attack, to physical attack. But if we've got this really, really weak link that somebody can just, start a fire at a substation, and then, well, we just won't have any flights in and out of the country.
Yeah, I mean, that has to be a real worry, that this looks to have been a genuine accident, but it does highlight the country's vulnerability to hostile actors, and we know there are hostile actors out there.
Absolutely. Rupert Dahl, great to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us, author of Green Tyranny. I mean, this is the thing, isn't it, Sam Armstrong? We don't seem to just be a resilient country, and the whole idea from Heathrow was, we had to turn off our systems, and then we have to reboot in it, but in a safe fashion. Look, I don't want people going, there might be a power outage when air traffic control is dealing with a plane landing, of course, but it does sound like other airports around the world do actually have a better system for this. They do actually not they're not as vulnerable. But this pretty much across the board, all of our major transport hubs, our major industries, are incredibly, basically vulnerable.
Yeah, and we've almost accepted it in this country and make a bit of a joke about it, like the railways stopping because there's leaves on the track. Yeah. The fact that the first bit of snow in this country, and by the way, most years in this country it snows a little bit, the entire transport network collapses. Yeah. It's not sustainable. It's not, becoming of a serious country that the first little bit of interruption, everything collapses. And, is it any wonder that so many young people, especially, are moving out overseas? And you heard Craig McKinley there a moment ago talking about the fact that millionaires are moving up to Portugal, etc. That people are just leaving to other countries that right now just seem to be better at doing everything.
Doing stuff. Yes, better at doing stuff. It is interesting that the data centres, they absolutely can't have their systems going down, so they make sure they've got the backup. But Heathrow obviously just kind of shrugged. We also know the chief exec of Heathrow just went home to bed. After a week, he went there, but he went home to bed. You think, I'm thinking maybe you should have been there around the clock, and maybe you could have got things working. And again, we often find things aren't mended because someone's working from home. But there we are. We're coming up to the top of the hour. We're going to take a quick news break. Coming up in this hour, we are going to be talking to the brilliant Alison Pearson about the anniversary of lockdowns yesterday. Also going to be talking to John Bolton, the former Donald Trump security advisor, about what's going on with those Ukraine peace talks. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so that we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament. To respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because, as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Great to have your company. Great also to have the company of Sam Armstrong, commentator, who's still joining me in the studio. Whether you are listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it's great to have you join us. But also, I'd love to hear from you as well. In particular, I want to hear from you about the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. We're told she's going to axe up to 50,000 civil service jobs in her spring statement on Wednesday, slashing £2 billion from government running costs. But guess what? Public sector unions aren't happy. I know, I'm surprised as you are. But I'd love to hear what you think of that, especially given that she has reignited the freebie gate row as she defended accepting two £600 seats in a corporate box at a Sabrina Carpenter concert. Her of Espresso, that was her big hit, Espresso. I sound like one of those judges going, who are the Beatles? She accepted them this month on security grounds. Apparently, these people cannot leave their homes unless they are in it, surrounded by the great and the good. Apparently, rich people aren't a risk to them. Just hoi polloi, you and me, we are a risk. But I'd love to know what your reaction is to that. And again, just totally and utterly out of touch, just not reading the room. You're making cuts to people. I mean, whether or not I think most civil servants in these jobs are doing anything useful, people are still going to lose their livelihoods. But, you swan off with your daughter with £600 corporate tickets with a load of free booze. Does she not realise what that would look like? Why are people offering her freebies? Why do you want Rachel Reeves in your corporate box unless you think that's going to be useful to you in some way? I want to know why. We don't even know who those corporate tickets were from because we haven't seen the register in the registered members' interest yet. I want to hear your reaction. Give us a call 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and then your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well at talkTV. Calls cost are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate message. Also going to be talking about lockdown. Yesterday marked 5 years since Boris Johnson ordered the nation to stay at home. I'll be reflecting on that moment that changed all of our lives, our economy. I think it's changed our society forever, with journalist Alison Pearson. Plus, going to talk about the latest migrant madness, as we know that more and more migrants are going to be housed illegal migrants and asylum seekers are going to be housed in hotels, despite the government having told us when they were trying to get elected they would end that. But also an illegal Iraqi migrant who fled his home country after he was threatened with arrest for an alleged fraud has avoided deportation from this country because he claimed a people smuggler threw away his ID and his phone. I really don't know what that's got to do with anything, but apparently that gives you the right to stay in this country. Plus, we're going to talk about the primary school that scrapped its annual Easter celebration and service in order to respect diverse religious beliefs. Well, I'm an atheist and it doesn't bother me to mark Easter, given that we are constitutionally a Christian country last time I looked. The school will, though, be celebrating Refugee Week in June. I know. Anyway, that is what's all coming up. Loads more besides, including I'm going to talk to John Bolton, Donald Trump's former national security advisor, former US ambassador to the UN, what he makes of the latest Ukraine ceasefire talks in Riyadh, and indeed in particular what he makes of Trump's special envoy, his golfing buddy, Steve Witkoff, basically spouting Kremlin talking points on Ukraine. All that coming up. Delighted to say joining me for all of that is Sam Armstrong. Welcome to you once again. Let's go back to the spring statement. Spending cuts, not tax rises. We're told by some polls is what people want. People are largely in support of welfare cuts. You wouldn't know it from the media coverage last week because it's just non-stop MPs bleating about how awful this is, and an interview with people who've got severe, obvious disabilities saying I might lose my benefits. We don't want people who've got severe, obvious disabilities to lose them. We want a load of people who are claiming they're a bit anxious to go back to work because we need them to be at work. Now we're told up between 10,000 and 50,000 civil service jobs could be cut, but given as you were pointing out earlier, and Craig McKinley was pointing out, we've had 135,000 extra civil service jobs since 2016. I'm not entirely sure we'd really notice if those people weren't there doing their job. But at the same time, Rachel Reeves taking freebie tickets.
Yeah, let's just be very clear. The cuts that she is proposing won't even touch the sides. Yeah. And, you know, people are turning around and saying they prefer spending cuts to tax rises. Well, boy, I bet they do, because taxes in this country have never been higher. We are currently paying wartime-style taxes in this country for services that are absolutely apocalyptically bad. It's never taken as long to get an NHS appointment, and you've never been paying as much for the privilege. That is the situation that we're in. And Rachel from Accounts, all she wants to do is tinker with the sidelines while droning very literally in her case, about the difficult choices she's making. They're not difficult choices. She's frankly ducking the difficult choices, and in between, what's she doing? She's swanning off to concerts in corporate boxes. Now, I'm sorry, this is a woman who is getting paid by us 150 grand there or thereabouts.
Apparently her bloke's a civil servant. He's on a six-figure salary too.
These are people that are milking it off the state. They can pay for their own tickets.
I mean, they're available. If you go on to sort of Ticketmaster or something, other outlets are available. Yeah. You could just buy these tickets, because there's always people returning them and selling them. She really wants to go, but she reckons it's a security issue. Keir Starmer used this argument about going to see Arsenal at the Emirates.
Look, let's be very clear. It is not a security issue. And if it is a security issue, the correct approach is to pay for 2 tickets, then to contact the venue and say, look, I'm going to be coming in with a load of armed coppers. What do you want us to do about it? And by the way, anyone who's ever worked in politics, anyone who's ever worked around ministers that are protected, know that sort of thing gets done all of the time.
I don't want her because she's the Chancellor and she may get grief from people, get difficulty. I don't want her not to be able to take her daughter to a concert. I'm not vindictive. I'm not like you should have to stay at home. But she really at risk? I mean, come on. I don't think there's snipers who could only aim at someone in the in the cheap seats.
There are other alternatives that don't involve you sitting in a box where you get free champagne, free food all night long, served by on white tablecloth linen, right? She is taking the mickey. She's taking us for a ride. She doesn't think we believe it. She knows that she criticised it when other people were doing it, but she just doesn't care. She thinks she's in this job. She thinks she's earned it. She thinks she deserves it, and she is going to milk it for every little bit it's worth.
What did you make of Angela Rayner as well? We've mentioned this a little bit earlier. She did a trip to Ethiopia, an official trip last month. No one can work out why the Deputy Prime Minister / communities, local government and housing secretary, I mean, quite a lot needs to be done in that area. Really, quite a lot of work that needs to be done. But why on earth she's on a trip to the East African country anyway? It's a diplomatic visit. She met leaders, witnessed the signing of an investment agreement. What, would that not have happened? It was a private deal, a private company. Why would that not have happened without her there? But apparently, and it's not been denied by her office, she asked if she could go on a personal safari during the official trip. So we paid for her flights there. 20 grand it cost for her flights. There was some business class, some economy class tickets for her and her stuff. She's there. It's all, red carpet rolled out. And then she says, "Oh, if I've got a spare day, can I go on a safari?" Now, the answer came back, no, you can't do that. That would be a personal thing. There'd be no benefit to it for the country. It's the fact that she asked. I mean, at least the civil servant said no. But again, it's this sense of entitlement. And it goes along with the whole, how dare the Tories use the Prime Minister's, the government's private jet for travelling around. Now, I don't want them swanning around and not actually being in contact with us mere mortals who travel economy class. But there is an argument that certainly for prime ministers and foreign secretaries jetting off, frankly, we're a first world country. I want you to turn up, after being able to work with your civil servants, and I want are you representing our country? Got no issue with that. But they were so critical of what the Tories were doing. Literally the moment they got into office, they're on that private jet, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Do you know what? I'm a little bit ticked off about Rachel Reeves taking these tickets, but I am absolutely livid at Angela Rayner.
She didn't get the safari.
She didn't get the safari, but you know what? There was no reason for her to be in Ethiopia in the first place.
No one could work out what this was about.
This is a woman whose job is to run local government, and this is coming at a time in our country's history in which Birmingham, bins have not been collected for months, in which vermin is growing and running around the street.
She could have done a safari in Birmingham.
Because our own Labour council in Birmingham cannot get its own house in order. And instead of dealing with that, she's swanning off, pretending that she's some big wig on the global international scene. She's doing it at our expense. That 20 grand didn't come from a donor, didn't come from a businessman, didn't come from her. It came from me, it came from you, it came from... That is the entire taxes of a working person for a year has been blown on this vanity trip.
And what have we got out of it?
And then for her to turn around and to say, oh, do you know what? I'd like to go look at some giraffes. I'd like to go look at the elephants. Can I see some lions now? That is not just wrong. That is a disgrace. She is basically ripping us off to pay for our own holidays. That's not just dodgy. That's not just got a whiff of something about it. That is flagrant stealing. She's stealing from us to have us paying our holiday.
She didn't get it, but this is the key thing. It just shows an attitude, doesn't it? Just to sort of, I'll get what I can. I'll snouts in the trough, I'll get what I can. But as I say, Birmingham's plenty of wildlife among the bins, the uncollected bins in Birmingham. I mean, by all accounts, the rats are the size of cats. Maybe not big cats, maybe not lions, but they're on the way. I mean, if you want to do something useful, go and deal with that. But again, that's the thing. Why is she there? I just get the impression that Keir Starmer is going, can you just get her out of the way? Can you just get her out of the country just go and get rid of her? But anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Let's also talk about the Kremlin and the White House. We've got these talks in Riyadh starting today in Saudi Arabia, where we're trying to see some sort of peace talks. Again, the peace talks never take place between Ukraine and Russia. It's always, it's Americans and Ukraine and Americans and Russia. Over the weekend, Steve Witkoff, who's the Donald Trump sort of special envoy, basically he's a property developer and golfing buddy of the Prime Minister, of the President. He has no international experience, but he's a deal maker. So you can see, OK, fair enough. You could be, might not have been an international diplomatic envoy, but those people often, they have not done a very good job so far. But he's supposed to be the fixer. He's done an interview with Tucker Carlson over the weekend where, I mean, frankly, he embarrassed himself and Donald Trump and his country. He didn't know some of the most basic facts. He talked about the regions in the east of the country that needed to that the Kremlin was claiming. He got none of the names right. He couldn't remember all of them, and he included Crimea in that. Well, Crimea is not in the east of the country. He has spouted numerous Kremlin talking points that are all over social media, from the Russian troll farms about Ukraine not being a proper country and the like. I mean, it's just a bit embarrassing, isn't it? Do you think there's any chance of a deal being done?
Yeah, well, look, I like bringing in people that aren't from a traditional political backgrounds into doing jobs in government, because often they do a much better job of it than ordinary diplomats that, as you say, have failed. But you've got to learn the basics about what you're negotiating. And
how can you negotiate it if you don't know the basics?
Geography is quite important when it comes to splitting up European countries, right? You need to know which bit is here, which bit is there. And some of the basic facts about where he was saying, oh, well, they had a referendum and this were the results. Now, look,
he basically said that the eastern region of Ukraine wants to be Russian. There was a referendum. And again...
Look, I think we can all take can
we point out the facts on that though? That it was a referendum held after the invasion by Russian troops, and it was not internationally legally recognised.
I'm prepared. Well, just put aside all of that for a minute. I'm prepared to accept a broad range of views about Russia, but I think we can all agree that the elections that they're holding there are ridiculous. You know, you have places where Vladimir Putin is winning more than 100% of the vote, right? These are silly, right? So you don't have to be full support of Ukraine like I would be, and you don't have to be just resistant to everything Russia says, but demonstrate some common sense. And this is what I worry about, is that you've got some people around Donald Trump that right now seem to see the proper research as going onto Twitter and looking at what people say. Now look, do your facts, do your homework, come in, show your business skills, and then you might get somewhere.
Well, exactly. But even Steve Witkoff, he was talking about how, Vladimir Putin was a good guy, and how he'd arranged for Russia's top artist to paint a portrait of Donald Trump, which he delivered to Donald Trump. Again, Putin is playing these guys like a fiddle. He knows the sort of stuff that they'll like, the possible Russian, US hockey match and things like that. Let's do a bit of nicey and a few nice gifts. That's fine, but don't get sort of rose-tinted glasses about these things. This at the same time, by the way, it does appear that Keir Starmer's peacekeeping plan for the coalition of the willing is pretty much collapsing. Pretty much, as far as we can tell, it's only France and Britain who were willing to actually offer any troops on the ground. And I think the key thing about this, it would need to be, even if it was just a few, it was like 20 troops. You need to have some, you need to have a whole range of countries. A lot of them are saying, look, if you said your troops will provide the backup with the NATO forces where they were supposed to be otherwise, not actually wanting boots on the ground. Now Starmer's looking more to it being air power being provided, so not boots on the ground. But again, we know that the Kremlin, we know that Vladimir Putin is going to reject any of this. He's going to say that he regards every single one of these actions as a provocation of some sort. And in the meantime, we don't appear to be any closer towards a ceasefire, because the demands that Vladimir Putin is making, and there doesn't seem to be any expectation that he should back down on any of these, certainly no threats from America requiring him to, are demands which are utterly unreasonable in terms of what he gets in return for a ceasefire.
The quagmire that we are in is the perfect combination of the three great failures: Vladimir Putin's maliciousness, Trump's stupidity, and Europe's cowardice. Right? Europeans love to talk a big game. I saw at the Munich Security Conference, you saw that ridiculous sight of someone crying, so this German crying. You've seen all this big game from European countries talking about how dreadful what Donald Trump is doing. And yet, when push comes to shove, when the rubber hits the road, each and every time they duck out, they duck the challenge, they don't do what's necessary, they won't even put the bare minimum in. And with a coalition of the willing, 10,000 troops, we're asking Germany to come up with 1,000, to pay for 1,000, to put 1,000 there, and they just won't even do it. It's pathetic. It is laughable. These countries, I don't want to hear from a European president, prime minister, all of the rest of it, lecturing actually those countries in the West, which include the United States, certainly includes this country, that time and time again, when the world has been facing a moment of danger, have shown up, have done what's necessary. The British troops, by the way, and the French didn't do this, went and died in Afghanistan and Iraq in order to defend the Western values from Islamist terrorists at that point. European soldiers, time and time again, didn't. I've had enough of them. I want to hear less of their lecturing. And we're never going to get a peace deal unless one of those three pillars, European cowardice, American stupidity, or Russian maliciousness, end. That's the truth of it.
Absolutely. And we're kind of only in control of one of those. So there we are. Absolutely couldn't agree with you more on all of that. Just finally want to talk to you about Norwood Primary School in Eastleigh in Hampshire. They sent a letter to parents and carers informing them they were not going to be going ahead with their Easter bonnet parade or their Easter service this year. Now, it's a non-religious school, but again, I'm not religious, I'm an atheist, but we've still marked Christmas and, Easter, we do the fun of it. And again, I used to love the Easter parade at my daughter's school. You make the bonnet, they do it at nursery as well. It's just a fun activity. And as we know, schools seem to mark pretty much every single religious event going these days, but apparently not Easter. And the reason why, this new head teacher, Stephanie Mander, said in her letter, although I am assuming her pronouns, everybody, so I hope I don't get in trouble for that. She explained that they are not going to be celebrating Easter because the state schools respect for diversity and their aim to create a more inclusive atmosphere. However, in June, they will be marking Refugee Week. I mean, this is so extraordinary. It's a bit of fun for the kids. I mean, I've got a friend who's got a kid at a nursery where they do Pride Days. Why 3-year-olds need to be talking about pride and sexuality? They're not even aware of any sexuality at all at that age. Why are you... I mean, sorry, the only people who want to impose that sort of stuff. And again, I raised my daughter absolutely not to be homophobic or anything else, But This stuff is what really gets parents, because we have schools where they don't, Christmas... I remember at my daughter's school, again, it's like Christmas became a winter festival. No, it's called Christmas. That's what we're saying. When you have the tree, and you do the Father Christmas, that's Christmas. That is literally, it is a national public holiday, Easter and Christmas in this country. We are a constitutionally Christian country. The only religion that gets downplayed in this country is anything to do with Christianity.
Yeah, let's be clear. There might be a bit of fun, OK? There might be nice things and parents might be cross because they're not doing this. But this is something much more sinister.
Absolutely.
These are public servants, public officials, people that have got rich on the back of our money, that hate this country, hate everything that represents this country's past, everything that made this country great, everything that makes this country good. And they see, when we see young boys and girls running around chasing the Easter Bunny, they see a celebration of this country and they hate it, and they have to stop it, they have to end it, and in its place, what do they want to do? They want to celebrate every force that is bringing and tearing this country down. They're going to go and celebrate Refugee Week. Let's be clear about who they're going to be celebrating there. They're going to be celebrating people that are paying criminal gangs to break into this country, in which many of them go straight onto MI5 terrorist watch lists, and all of them have participated and funded organised criminals that are conducting the most appalling practices and in which people die all the time. They are more than happy to celebrate that and won't celebrate something basic that people in this country have been celebrating for 1,600 years.
I know, but that's the thing. It's just so extraordinary. And again, it's so harmless, but it's not even just about it being harmless. It is actually a big part of our culture. This downplaying of British culture and traditions, bearing in mind the reason why these refugees stroke illegal migrants, that's what they're really talking about. The reason they come to this country, the reason why people pay $3.5 grand to get on a boat to come to this country, is because of the Judeo-Christian beliefs and traditions that have created our society, where you have, OK, it's not perfect, but we have democracy, we have individual freedoms, we have the rule of law, we have all of those things where we largely are left to our own devices. They are coming from countries which don't have that. And that's why they're fleeing those countries. This is the bizarre thing. So we haven't got a load of people in this country fleeing our values. They're not fleeing to Afghanistan or Iraq or some godforsaken country, with despotic rulers, and there is okay. Apart from Dubai, and that's largely where people are avoiding living, paying taxes, and let's face it, and they're avoiding. They're not actually imbued in the local religious culture. Who are we kidding? They're drinking alcohol. They're not going to the mosque. They're not praying 5 times a day when they're living in Dubai. So that's a load of nonsense. It's a Western lifestyle in a Muslim country. But people are not largely moving to countries of other faiths for a reason, because they don't have those freedoms. And I just find it extraordinary that children are being taught somehow that our own culture, our own history, and I say this as someone who's atheist parents. I was raised an atheist, I raised my child as an atheist. I still celebrate and mark all those festivals because they are a massive part of our national cultural life. And if you want to respect diversity, which I'm not sure we should, if you want to respect different communities, bringing people into, hey, you live here now, or you're born here from parents who've come here, come and enjoy our culture. Because if you don't want to enjoy our culture, why are you here?
Well, but Julia, nobody from these cultures that have come into this country was asked about this. No, none of them called for it. And time again, when actually you go out into Britain's minority communities and ask them, you know,
they celebrate
do you support
all this
it?
stuff.
They love it. And this is why they came to this country. They came because our values, our culture, our history are not just good amongst many. They are world-leading, world-changing, built the world as it is today. They are good. They are worthy of celebration. And don't you let anybody tell you that there is anything to be ashamed of about this country, our values, our culture, our history, and everything that we have given the world.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Steve, for that. 11:25 is the time. I want to hear from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. We're going to talk more about this in the next hour. Also going to be talking to Alison Pearson about that lockdown anniversary yesterday. And I do want to hear from you, particularly on the Spring Statement and Freebie Gate and Angela Rayner, Rachel Reeves, and the others. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Rachel Reeves, your colleague, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, under fire today for taking some free tickets to Sabrina Carpenter's concert. Have you been in receipt of any free tickets recently?
No, I haven't.
Do you think she should have taken them?
So I heard the Chancellor answering questions from the BBC's Laura Koonsberg on this yesterday, and I don't have anything further to add to the comments that she made.
OK. Heidi Alexander, thank you very much indeed. Secretary of State for Transport hasn't taken any free tickets. That's a good one.
This is a really, really big issue, and it goes to the heart of this government's failure to have a plan. Remember, Mike, they said they had a plan, you know, we're going to control the boats, smash the gangs, all that sort of stuff. Like so many of the things that they said to get elected, that was all an empty promise. On day one, they scrapped the Rwanda deterrent plan.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. Welcome back to the show. 11:28 is the time. Let's get straight to your messages and your calls coming in thick and fast about, all the stories we're talking about, particularly Rachel Reeves and cutting public spending and civil service jobs this week in her Spring Statement, but defending on security grounds accepting 2 freebie concert tickets for herself and her daughter. Sue says she also claimed those tickets couldn't be bought. No price, but that she would declare them. So there was a price. How many bad decisions that no one held to account? Just, oh well, never mind. Terry says not much point in being a minister if there are no perks. Tories did it. Now it's their Libor's turn. I mean, but that's the thing, but you can't criticise it when the other half do it and then do it yourself. Brian says the public should learn to save by getting free tickets and food, clothing like the Chancellor Prime Minister. Well, exactly, or our finances would be better if we didn't pay for those things. Laura says how this fraud is still in a job baffles me. We're a gaslit population in an abusive relationship with our government. Geraldine says simply, my reaction is not postable. I said I wouldn't be able to read it out and you'd probably get in trouble at work. Well, let's go to Chris. He's on the line in Hereford. Hello, Chris.
Hello, how are you?
Very well. What do you want to say, my love?
Well, it's about this expenses and all this rubbish, because the simple reason is that when the Conservatives were in power, they were criticised and lambasted about expenses and wallpaper and this, that, and the other. And well, the Labour, they're just, this government is doing exactly the same as the previous government did. Well,
they've all been. Well, it's like, you know, the expenses scandal that was in the late 2000s. I mean, again, 2008 was it? I mean, that was on all sides. That was all parties. And then, and as you say, you know, each party when they're in power keep taking freebies. The opposition, but they get offered this stuff. The main thing for me is I don't mind someone having a nice freebie. I think the optics about it shows poor judgment. Yeah. But my thing is, why does someone want to give Rachel Reeves and her daughter £600 concert tickets?
Well, that's it. Yeah, as I said, I'm frightened because I claim PIP.
Yeah.
And I am so frightened now of what they're going to do because I don't know if I'm going to lose my benefits or not. I work. I'm not a stranger. I do go to work, but I've got a disability. Yep. I am now worried about, am I going to lose my £600
and that's where the political judgment comes in, doesn't it? Like, how do they not realise that how it's going to look to people, particularly people like you, who rely on those benefits?
Yeah, and I said, I can only work 20 hours a week because I've got health conditions and all that.
Yeah.
And we've got another for 4 years of this.
Yep.
And I can't understand why we're gonna roll on 4 years' time. That's all I say.
Yeah, well, I have to say, again, when it comes to welfare benefits, I just don't believe it should be beyond the wit of man that we can cut the benefits. I mean, not cut, but like stop benefits for people who don't need them and who can go and work, and make sure that people like you, if you need them, get what you need, because that's what a civilised society should do. Chris, thank you so much for your call. Appreciate that. Let's go to Sean. He's in Northampton. Sean, you want to talk about this school that's banned Easter but is going to celebrate Refugee Week?
Hi, Julie. I'm
Hello.
sitting here getting angrier and angrier as I listen to the show.
Sorry about that.
What concerns me, right? If you look at it, I used to work in schools for many, many years on the business side.
Yep.
And you're continually told to watch out for this, anti-anything, and to inform, prevent if anybody, gives you any indication that they've got their strong views on one thing or the other. Now, to me, this head teacher is basically banning a Christian festival.
Yep.
And I just think it's obscene. And I think that somebody should go in there and ask her what her values are.
Yep.
And is she actually teaching these young children that anything to do with Christianity is wrong? And the reason I say that is in this week alone, the actual genuine this week, I went to the school where my grandson goes, had a meeting with the head teacher. My grandson was coming home saying to me that, "Grandad, you're a Nazi." I said, "Oh, yeah, why is that, mate?" He said, "Because we was talking today, and anybody that didn't vote for Labour and anybody that doesn't like immigration," which I'm afraid that's me complete, "so you must be a Nazi."
And who'd said that? The teacher had said it?
One of his teachers, yeah. It said that to him during one of the language, whatever, right? So I went and told the head teacher, and I'm not one to go and make massive waves. I said, I don't want the lady to get sacked or whatever, but I certainly want you to have a word in this person's ear.
Absolutely.
And say that I'm not having my grandson. And it just makes me sick. I mean, last week we had to watch Prince Charles have 600 Muslims for a end of Ramadan party.
Yeah.
You know, this is I don't care what anybody else says. Our fundamental values, like you just said, are based on the Christian values that have gone on in this country nearly 2,000 years. And these people now that are choosing up, that head teacher down in Eastleigh, she'll be on about 90 grand a year. What right does she have to tell the white basic people from the Portsmouth area that it's wrong to celebrate Easter?
I would be surprised if everyone of every different race wasn't bothered by that. I'll tell you something, though. You look at the actual results for that school. They're certainly not prioritising teaching the kids stuff because they are well below average. And again, it's always the schools that are the wokest that actually aren't delivering for the kids who need that help the most. Sean, I so appreciate your call. Good on you and going into the school and standing up and just saying, how dare you? I mean, we're going to talk about that a little bit in a few moments, because the National Education Union just basically said that anyone who votes reform, schools should be warned about, pupils should be warned about that. It's extraordinary that this is happening. I'm going to take a quick break now. Up next, we're going to be talking about what happened 5 years ago yesterday. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:36 is the time. Now, 5 years ago yesterday, this happened.
From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home. Because the critical thing we must do to stop the disease spreading between households. If you don't follow the rules, the police will have the powers to enforce them, including through fines and dispersing gatherings.
So that happened, and it set in train basically 2 years of, let's be honest, utter madness. Devastation for our economy, devastation for our health service, devastation for our schools, for our pupils. And we are still living with the impact of those massive impacts on our civil liberties today and possibly for years to come. Well, let's talk about it now with someone who is a fantastic fighter for our freedoms during that time, journalist and columnist at The Telegraph, Alison Pearson. A very, very good morning to you, Alison.
Morning, Julia.
Thank you.
I was wondering where your damehood was for your noble fight in this great struggle.
Holding out for Empress, as indeed so should you as well. Now, you and I were among the people who were criticising this. I have to say, I wasn't the first. I took at least 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks to come round to this, because it was people like you, like Brendan O'Neill and Toby Young, people who were saying, we think this is all bad, we need to talk about this. They brought me around. I was already in lockdown when this announcement was made. I was already, I've got to be honest, very sick with COVID. I'd caught it a week earlier, and my whole family were isolating at the time, we were unwell. But this set in train an extraordinary set of events that we're going to be living with, not just we're living with right now today, but we're going to be living with for decades to come. What do you make of that moment, that decision? How do you feel when you hear those words?
It's pretty chilling, isn't it? Particularly when Boris mentions the police will have these powers. And I understand that people were afraid. People were paid to frighten us, Julia. Very, very gifted behavioural psychologists were being paid to make us feel afraid. I have no judgment on anyone who is scared. And like you, I thought maybe 3 weeks to flatten the curve.
That's what they told us, yeah.
Let the hospitals get their ducks in a row. That seemed perfectly legitimate. But then there was a sudden realization they're not going to give us our freedoms back. And what have we traded them for? And if you look back, Julia, you can think about all this madness. Like, what was the rule of six? I mean, there was just this craziness, wasn't there? Stuff that they made stuff up.
Well, we know that now. We know, again, one of our good friends, Isabel Oakeshott, she got hold of Matt Hancock's WhatsApps to help write his memoirs. I mean, what a fool he was there. She gave them, I think, the best bit of public service or journalism we've seen in many decades. We've given to the Telegraph, became public. We realise now that most of the decisions were made on a whim. They were just like, oh, well, let's do one over Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland. Let's keep our kids in masks in schools for 8 hours a day as well in England. There was so little science behind any of this, so little thought, no cost-benefit analysis. The reason we locked down after months, by the way, of our scientific and medical advisors saying we wouldn't, and the Prime Minister assuring us we wouldn't, because we had a pandemic plan and it didn't involve lockdown, because lockdowns don't save lives. We knew that already. Was because of this Ferguson Imperial College computer model, which convinced Dominic Cummings that we were all going to die. And on a whim, government policy changed.
I think there was huge pressure. You've got this Neil Ferguson Imperial College model saying up to 500,000 people could be dead by whenever it was, November, if you don't lock down. So it would take a leader of real courage, wouldn't it, to say, hang on a minute, does that sound okay? So they were under huge pressure. Yeah. My main criticism would be certain things that were completely ludicrous, like chaining up children's playgrounds, closing schools when children were at no risk from COVID. Absolute madness to do that. And we now see 1.5 million children, Julia, with speech delay, not making educational progress, huge absenteeism from secondary and junior schools. It's broken the bond of trust between parents and the authorities.
Yeah.
Parents used to say, you're going to school, don't worry, you've got a cold, you know, get your coat on, you're going to school. Now, 800,000 children a week in secondary schools are being allowed to stay home. And I would suggest that's because parents think, well, you would let them into schools for 18 months so they can bloody well stay, excuse my French, they can stay home now.
It's optional now. And again, I said the schools thing, that was something certainly I always, from word go, so that we should do. And we're often told, as you say, people were scared. The media were ramping that scaring up, and we know from our brilliant friend Laura Dodsworth, and she's done some fantastic work and a brilliant book about the level of fear that was deliberately engendered. There was a belief in government we weren't going to do as we were told, like other countries. We wouldn't give in. I'm still quite ashamed of a lot of my fellow Brits and how willing they were to be told to follow absurd rules. You know, again, every time I see one of those arrows or on a circle in a supermarket or in a train station, I have a visceral reaction to it. But people were genuinely scared, and we're constantly told we didn't know. We didn't know what we know now. It was understandable. Actually, we did. I've gone back and looked at some of the videos of interviews I was doing and some of the tweets and things I was writing in February 2020 and stuff that you were doing as well, and other people. We did know that children were basically at pretty much no risk. We did know it was mostly people in their 80s and 90s who were at risk. We did know what the death rate was. We knew all of this stuff. It was just basically pumped up into a much bigger thing than it was. Now, the trouble is we kind of got into a debate where it seems to be there's people who basically say everyone was going to die, and if we didn't lock down, everyone's granny would have died. Abject nonsense. And people on the other side saying it's all a fiction, it was made up, there wasn't really a new disease, no one died from it. And neither of those things is true.
No, and I find that we're in this sort of purity Olympics, aren't we, where people like us who've got very legitimate objections to the terrible harm that's been caused, you know, someone like me will get told off for not having been sufficiently anti-vax or not having been sufficiently, you know, it's ridiculous, really.
I wore a mask on a plane, so obviously I'm part of the problem, you know.
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of people trying to catch people out, and I think that was one of the worst aspects, is people were set against other people. It felt to me so fundamentally un-British. I even found myself seeing some neighbours in the garden with their elderly parents where that wasn't allowed, and part of me, Julia, actually for 1 second thought, oh, that's not allowed. And I thought, Alison, what are you doing?
Yes.
It's completely okay to be outside. That might be the last time you see your elderly parents. Let's not forget the suffering. Let's not forget elderly people, you know, husbands of people in care homes, children of people in care homes, not allowed to see their mums or dads.
Dads not being allowed at the birth of their children. Women having to go through miscarriages on their own because the partner wasn't allowed to be with them as they miscarried. I mean, some of the stories we did, one of the things I'm most proud of that we did do during that time, apart from just trying to keep people sane by being, I'm not bigging ourselves up, we were the only broadcaster questioning this, whereas every other broadcaster was sending a political editor to Downing Street going, why aren't you locking down more? Why don't you lock down for longer? Why don't you have stricter rules? The only time they got upset was when there was the Scotch egg rule, for goodness sake. But the amount of times we actually asked people to tell us your lockdown stories. So while everyone was focusing on, I'm so surprised that my 98-year-old mother in a care home has died, and I'm as sympathetic as we can be, that's not an unusual situation to be in. But we were talking to people, you know, whose children had no education and were self-harming, to people who lost their businesses, to people who, you know, living in domestic abuse, to people, again, not being able to see their mother in a care home, literally banging on the window and desperate to see them. People who were affected by this day in, day out. And in all of the anniversaries that have been, you know, all the stories in the last few weeks that have been covered by the media, it's always about people who lost a loved one to COVID. Every time, and it's pretty much always somebody in their 80s or 90s, not focusing on the rest of the population who could have been living a pretty normal life all of that time and bringing no extra risk to their elderly loved ones.
Exactly. And we are now seeing, predictably, the increase of cancer deaths because younger people in their 30s and 40s and 50s who were not able to get a scan, who were not able to get a cancer diagnosis, they are now dying, Julia, in greater numbers, and they are younger population. And as you say, not to be disrespectful, but the average age of COVID, which came out when it was in Italy early in the pandemic, was 82.4 years.
Yeah.
As a society, we sacrifice children for the very elderly, and I don't think an earlier generation would have done that. I don't think the wartime generation would have thought that was acceptable.
No.
I think it was panic, it was mass hysteria, and as you say, lots of our broadcasting colleagues. I mean, I remember BBC Clive Myrie reporting from a morgue, in a morgue, right? There were people. Flu presented a greater threat to the younger population than COVID.
And we'd never closed down. And again, we had pre-pandemic planning, and everyone was talking about how people like us, people who were talking about we need to follow what Sweden had done. And again, if you look at the stats for Sweden, from COVID deaths and deaths from other causes, damage to the economy, damage to children, their kids were all in full-time education up to the age of 16. They are pretty much the best in the world in terms of outcomes, because they followed pre-existing pandemic planning, which told us that you might think that you're saving lives, but you're not. And again, 3 weeks to flatten the curve while the NHS got its act together. We built Nightingale hospitals. That didn't seem unreasonable to me at the time. But once we went into it, we were never coming out. And actually, it was only the Partygate revelations that stopped us going into a lockdown in December 2021. We would have carried on doing it. I have to say, one of the things I still find most difficult is the number of people I know, well-to-do people. Our kids had 6 hours of Zoom lessons every day. The kids are doing fine. Parents had a lovely time, no problem with their income. And the number of them who still say to me, oh, but we had a lovely time during lockdown. I have to say, I have to bite my tongue and walk away, because I simply cannot trust myself to say things that not to say the wrong thing.
Well, look at the economy. 9 million people are economically inactive.
Yep.
We seem to have lost the habit of work. Those are working age people, Julia.
Yep.
They printed £450 billion.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? So now we've got a vast national debt that we're paying ever, 100 billion a year to service the interest on, and people wonder why why there's tough economic times.
Do you think the lessons will ever be learned? I think there's no point even mentioning the COVID inquiry. That's going to be a complete waste of time, an absolute whitewash. But do you think I'm not aware that any of my media colleagues have really learned the lesson, other than the fact they now are going, oh, isn't it terrible all these kids are onto an education? Isn't it terrible about our NHS? Do you think, yeah, and you guys were you were calling me a COVID denier when I pointed this out in April 2020. Do you think the lessons will be learned?
Very reluctantly and very slowly. We are seeing huge progress in the United States under Trump. Jay Bhattacharya, one of our great colleagues in the COVID trenches, Julia, he's just been made the head of health services in the United States, and Jay has described lockdown as the biggest public health mistake in human history. So I think we're seeing a lot of lawsuits over there. They're flushing out the fact that this virus came from a Chinese lab. When we were saying that in the summer of 2020, I was called racist. I was banned from Twitter. So I think that the truth is leaching out. I think there's huge embarrassment. Nobody will, Matt Hancock saying, let's scare the pants off everyone by releasing the news of the Kent variant a bit later. These people I think some of them should be in jail.
Oh,
personally.
I'm with you. I want criminal charges, absolutely. Alison Pearson, you've been such a wonderful, strong voice on this, and you're a great friend to me as well. And I know we have a number of colleagues who we were all out there in the trenches, and it's great to still have you fighting the good fight. Journalist and columnist at the Telegraph, Alison Pearson. Thank you for that. Quick word from Sam Armstrong.
Yeah, the people who make me crossest are those that describe lockdown as the highlight of their lives. That was the best moment of time for them, and they look back at it.
How lovely for you.
I look back on it and remember the fact that I couldn't go to my grandfather's funeral. I look back at it and think of another relative who died from a heart attack because the ambulance took over 2 hours to get to them. That's the cost. Those are the living.
Exactly. I am still my anger. I can't even watch any of these items on TV. You know, when they say I'm looking back, I have to turn the TV because I don't want to have to smash my TV in because I'm still so angry, and the failure of so many of my media colleagues to do their job properly. When the biggest story of their lifetime hit, they basically went, "Oh, I'm going to sit at home. How lovely." And then I'm going to ask the Prime Minister really searching questions about how we should lock down more and damage even more people's lives and more of our economy. It is utterly bewildering to me. And again, I really think we need to have a reckoning. We really do. Your thoughts, always welcome. 11:50 is the time. Up next, going to talk more about that primary school that has banned Easter. This is Talk, Home of Common Sense.
We've seen record levels of arrivals in small boats on their watch, and now they're starting to talk about a similar plan.
It's up to the Brits. We've got MAGA, we've got America First here. You had Brexit in the UK. We're seeing this across Europe, whether it's Prime Minister Maloney or whether it's Modi on the Indian subcontinent. People are starting to say enough is enough. We would like to have our countries back. Borders matter. Sovereignty matters.
Absolutely. How come aren't doing that? They're trashing our heroes. They took all their pictures out and put the head of communist parties in and pictures of themselves in.
Rachel Reeves, your colleague, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, under fire today for taking some free tickets to Sabrina Carpenter's concert. Have you been in receipt of any free tickets recently?
No, I haven't.
Do you think she should have taken them?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Talk the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:54 is the time. Let's come back to that school, that primary school, Norwood Primary School in Eastleigh in Hampshire, which sent a letter to parents and carers informing them that their Easter bonnet parade and their Easter service will not be held this year. But don't worry. Instead of that, in June, they will be marking Refugee Week. Of course they will. The head teacher of Norwood Primary School, Stephanie Mander, said she was doing this to respect diversity and to create a more inclusive atmosphere. But how does banning a national public festival, effectively a celebration of we are a constitutionally Christian country, how does that promote respect for diversity? Let's talk to Momus Najmi, who's a writer and commentator and joins us now. Good morning to you. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm an atheist. I don't follow the Christian faith, but I do live in a country which is constitutionally Christian and brought up with those festivals. We mark Easter, we mark Christmas because they're national public holidays. Shouldn't schools mark those and celebrate those?
It's very funny to see about this school as well. Sorry about my camera. I keep going off.
Don't worry.
Yeah, it's very funny to see about the school as well, because I saw the report that Ofsted rated the school good in all categories, except for the most important category for outcomes for children and learners.
So it's the only one that really matters to most parents. Oh, so they've got a great bullying policy, a great diversity policy. But I've noticed, I've looked at their results and well below average. I mean, the one thing this teacher ain't, I think she's quite a new head teacher at school, but one thing they're not focusing on is getting their kids some good exam results.
Exactly. And what they thought was not how to improve that, but we will have more of the things that are not helping kids. We'll have the refugee week in June, and we will work, as she said, working to become a school of sanctuary.
What?
Sanctuary for what? This is what she wants.
Should be a sanctuary for people who want to learn.
Exactly. So, I mean, when it comes to Easter and those things as well, like Christianity is the most inclusive religion out of all the religions that are even within Britain, right? So she wouldn't be cancelling anything to do with Islam or anything if it was an Islamic school or something like that, which is the most exclusionary religion, which wants to take over other religions, right? So it is a bizarre thing, and it's not like you said. It's, you know, you can be an atheist and stuff, but you can recognize that the cultural values of this country are Christian based.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, I believe. I mean, you were raised as a Muslim, a follower of Islam, but you've rejected that religion. Again, in many countries, you'd be punished with death, as opposed to being able to talk about it openly. But this is the thing: you don't have to be a follower of a particular religion to think, oh, let's mark it. Look, I've got to be honest with you, we just follow if any festival if it's got chocolate or fireworks, I'm happy to play, basically. But the key thing is, the Easter and Christmas and other events in the Christian calendar, they are national public holidays in a nationally constitutionally Christian country, and they are part of our national tradition and our culture. And if you want to be inclusive, bringing people of all faiths and none into that national history and culture is the most inclusive thing you can do.
Exactly, but they don't actually want what they're saying, right? They don't want inclusivity, they don't want diversity and stuff. The whole idea is to break down British culture and values and British connection with the people so that they can pour in their own ideas.
But why is the head teacher doing this? Stephanie Mander, why is she doing this though?
It's the same reason why any of them, when they come, like any of the woke liberals or communist Marxist, when they come in any position of power, they will reenact their ideology. It's because they have been now given the opportunity, so they can do their part.
So for you, this is much more sinister. I mean, you might think, oh, with kids wandering around in an Easter bonnet and going to a service. That's not it. For you, this is much more sinister than that.
Yeah, it is much more sinister, and some people are doing it intentionally, and other people's like her might be doing it unintentionally.
Useful idiots, you might say.
Yeah, exactly. Like, she is a useful idiot, because what is happening is the communists on one side, they're trying to break down the British values and any connection with Britain so they can take over, while the Islamists on the other side are doing the same so they can take advantage of the breakdown of Britain. And then you have in the middle all these woke liberals, including this headmistress as well, all these woke liberals who are so in need for their virtue signaling to be recognized. Then they're helping both those factions.
Yeah, but it is always fascinating how we always talk about, we need to know about everyone's different belief systems. Yeah, fine, teach me about Islam, teach me about Judaism, teach me about Buddhism. But at the end of the day, the one that they don't respect, the one they don't want to teach, is the one that is actually the national constitutional religion and the history of this country. Momus Najmi, thank you so much for joining us. Sorry it couldn't be for longer. Thank you for that. Up next, we're going to get the latest headlines. More coming up. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. Very much appreciate you joining me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or on your connected device. Always good to have you join me. Commentator Sam Armstrong also still with me. Get your thoughts on all of the stories we're still talking about, including in this hour an NHS nurse who was punished after she called a transgender patient Mr. The patient, a convicted paedophile, a man, by the way, from a high-security men's prison, called Jennifer Mill, the nurse, the N-word 3 times in a very aggressive outburst at St Helier Hospital in Surrey. But it was the nurse who ended up being investigated and disciplined by the hospital for using the wrong pronouns for a man, calling him Mr. We'll be talking about that also in just a couple of moments. Police face being dragged into yet another 2-tier policing row and justice row over plans to review police bias against young black people, as police chiefs have told their forces that treating everyone the same is in itself racist. They can't just not be racist, they have to be anti-racist. This is critical race theory come to life. We'll talk about that. Plus, the US and Russian delegations will meet for more Ukraine peace talks in Saudi Arabia today, amid concerns that Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is pushing the Kremlin line and is out of his depth. We're going to be talking to John Bolton, Donald Trump's former national security advisor in his first term, also former US ambassador to the UN, about what he makes of the chances of a ceasefire deal. Plus, the Education Secretary has asked counter-fraud experts to investigate reports that millions of pounds in student loans are being claimed by fraudulent students from abroad, huge number of them from Romania, with no intention to study or to pay back the loans. Guess who picks up the bill for that? Yep, it's us again. Anyway, all of that coming up, loads more besides. As I say, Sam Armstrong also still with me. Sam, just really interesting, just before we go on to this next topic, interesting to hear from Mohammed Najmi, as a former Muslim himself. Again, me and as an atheist, being completely and utterly perplexed as to why a primary school head, and this is not the only school it's happening in lots of schools, it's just the ones that make it into the papers, basically banning, an Easter celebration. Numerous schools, my daughter's school, started calling the winter, winter celebrations instead of Christmas celebrations, when, you're talking about, you've got Father Christmas and a Christmas tree. That's Christmas. That's not, that's not a Hanukkah. That's not anything else. We only see this treatment of Christian festivals, never ever of any other festival. Now, the key thing is that's not just a Christian festival, it's part of our culture and our history and our heritage. Do you agree with Mohammed Najmi, our guest, pointing out that she thinks it's much more sinister than just not letting kids wear an Easter bonnet or talk about Christmas? That actually these head teachers are effectively like the useful idiots who are doing some very sinister work.
Let's be clear, when they are attacking children rolling around Easter eggs or chasing a bunny, they are not attacking that. What they are doing is they are attacking the fabric, the foundations of our society, of the culture, the values, the heritage, the traditions that made this country the greatest nation on earth ever and one of the biggest forces for good in the history of mankind. They hate it. They believe that each and every aspect of our culture is wrong, that it's somehow problematic, that it is worthy of attack. And the only way that we can be improved and bettered is by importing the values, the people and the problems of other countries into this country.
Even though they're fleeing here rather than us fleeing to their countries, which suggests there's something quite good about our country.
Yeah, and by the way, there are other countries that are quite wealthy around the world, right? People aren't just coming to this country because it's a prosperous country, or comparatively prosperous, less prosperous than it was. They are coming here because they respect our values, our traditions, our culture.
Well, no, they want to benefit. Lots of people want to benefit from our values and our culture.
Yeah, but
they
also,
not respect it.
Also, legal migrants that have come to this country over an extended period of time, actually, often you will find that the most patriotic people you meet come from those communities. They love it. They love the royal family. They love our food, our cultures, our values.
Well, living somewhere where if you work hard, you can prosper. They've got the rule of law.
These are not people that when you ask them what it means to be English, they struggle to answer, right? They love this country. They know what this country is about and they want to participate in it. The people that hate this country, the people that do it down, down, the people that want to end these traditions are time and time and time again university educated, public sector working, liberal people. More often than not, I find with these people that have been done nothing other than go onto these courses all the time, members of the unions, they're the ones that hate this country the most.
It's so tragic they feel that way, but then they impose it on our children. Again, our children basically being brought up to believe, you know, there are 47, 87 different genders, that we're all horrible and racist, our history is terrible, we should apologise for it, and every other culture is better than ours. How's that going to work out for us? I think very badly. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do get in touch, 0344 499 1000. Also, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, set to cut public spending in civil service jobs in her statement, a speaking statement on Wednesday. But she's also defended accepting 2 freebie £600 concert tickets for herself and her daughter. The hypocrisy is strong with this one. What is your reaction? I say give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Right, let's go on to, again, I say another topic, but it's actually very linked with that primary school topic. Let's talk about Jennifer Mell. She's an NHS nurse. She came here from, I think it's Uganda, many, many years ago. She's made a life here, she's worked here, spotless career in the NHS. She has never had a formal complaint or anything made about her. Does her work well? Until she had a bit of a problem with one evening, one day when she was at work, when a patient was brought in from a men's prison, a convicted paedophile who claimed to be trans. She, inadvertently, in a conversation about this patient who was causing a lot of difficulties for other staff, referred to him, because he is a man, as Mr. and he. This prompted a huge, violently abusive, racist tirade involving the N-word 3 times towards this nurse from this paedophile patient. And you'd think that she would have been given some help from the hospital which employed her after this really traumatic experience. But no, she was put under disciplinary proceedings because she'd used the incorrect pronouns and been transphobic. Well, let's talk about this with Andrea Williams, who's Chief Executive of the Christian Legal Centre, who are helping this nurse with her case against the hospital after she was disciplined. Very good afternoon to you, Andrea.
Good afternoon.
I saw this story and I just thought this can't be believable, and yet again, it's another case where this madness is happening. Now, we would have loved to speak to Jennifer as well, but she's at work, working in the NHS, doing a good job for patients, as she was on this occasion. Now, we're not allowed to know the identity of the convicted paedophile, but just talk us through what actually happened, because he was being very aggressive with all of the staff, wasn't he?
He was, and he was on a urology ward. He came in with prison guards. He was shackled, his arms and his feet. But Jennifer, being the experienced and established nurse that she was, knew that she was treating him as she treats all her patients, with compassion and with kindness. She wanted to serve him well. She could see that he was agitated. She was trying to calm down the situation. Indeed, the other nurse that was working with her, Jennifer, that night was the most senior nurse on the ward. She came to her and said, we need to do something about this particular patient. Yeah. And Jennifer then intervened, and it was really when she was talking to the consultant doctor on the phone that this man heard her referring to him as Mr.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, he came to the door.
He is a 6-foot bloke, this guy, isn't he?
He's a 6-foot bloke, and you may remember the case of David Mackerath. He was a doctor who was asked during a training session whether he would be able to call a 6'2" bloke a woman on a medical record, and he said no, and for that he actually didn't get his job within the Department of Work and Pensions. Yeah. So this is actually not a hypothetical case anymore. It's a real. It's real.
It's actually happened. And the patients remonstrated with her, abused her very aggressively, lunged at her, had to be restrained by the prison guards. So, I mean, a very intimidating situation for her. Lots, calling her the N-word 3 times. I mean, totally and utterly unacceptable behaviour. A nasty little piece of work, let's be honest. But she explained to him very calmly, and continued to treat him nevertheless, that actually, she wasn't willing to refer to him as a woman, because of her Christian beliefs. That was the only reason why she mentioned it, was because of her Christian beliefs. Now, I'm an atheist, but I wouldn't be willing to refer to him as a woman because, you know, because, hey, I'm sane and I understand facts, you know. And we know, thanks to Maya Forstadt, it's a protected philosophical belief. I mean, it's not a belief, it's a fact. But she was quite traumatised by this, as you understandably would be. Most of us don't have this happen to us in our normal working life. And then what happened next?
Well, she was traumatised by it, but she continued to treat him that night. And in fact, he calmed down, but he then made a complaint about her. And as she finished her shift and was on her way home on the bus, and by the way, she is one of those people that you were referring to, in fact, in the last section of your show today. She just loves this country, the opportunities that is given to her. She says that she's never been racially abused, in fact, which is a great testament to our country in many ways. But until that night. And she was then asked to fill out an incident report, and then she was put under a disciplinary process. She was the one that was moved from that particular ward that she loved. She loved the busyness of it, and was then unable to get extra shifts in order to do overtime, which she relied upon in terms of income for her children. So she was being punished.
Yeah, punished for, and again, helping a patient, and she had there'd never been a complaint against before. She hadn't said, I'm not treating him, he's a man, you know, he's nothing of the sort. And yet the word of this paedophile, that apparently him, and by the way, it's worth mentioning what this man was convicted of. He as a man, had posed as if he was female, a young girl online, to lure young teenage boys into committing sex acts, which he then recorded. So he had deliberately used a fake female identity. So, I mean, which is, of course, what he was doing right now. And anyway, if he isn't a man, why is he housed in a male prison, you could ask?
Well, exactly.
It is, I mean, it is so extraordinary. So she's bringing a case for constructive dismissal, or?
Yes, for discrimination against her religious faith.
Yeah, because she has the right, I mean, again, which is the right to politely explain why she won't be forced to lie and pretend.
That's exactly right. She hasn't been dismissed. We managed to the process, as you know, very often the process can be the punishment. She came under discipline. She's currently subject to disciplinary proceedings with the regulatory body, and that again that they are referencing matters such as you're refusing to treat this patient with the dignity and respect that is
that you should give a paedophile.
And the truth
paedophiles have feelings too, Andrea.
The reality for this nurse is that night was that she was treating the patient. Paedophile or not, in one sense, that night she was being an amazing nurse. She was the senior nurse who did her job, and when you meet her, and you see her energy and how she is, you can just imagine that, as is the reality, that she was very, very popular.
Yeah, it is just extraordinary. I'm so glad you are supporting her. I'm so sorry that she needs to have your support, that this has happened to her. It is extraordinary, but do keep us posted on the developments there. Chief Executive of the Christian Legal Centre, Andrea Williams. Just an outrageous case. Well, let's bring in Harry Miller now. He's a former police officer and founder of Fair Cop. Harry, you know, you've been taken to task, gone all the way to the senior courts to protect your freedom, to not have to pretend that you think that men can become women, women can become men. But this is a much more egregious case of a woman being racially abused, physically threatened by a convicted evil criminal. I mean, because paedophiles are about as bad as it gets. And then being disciplined for perfectly reasonably and politely referring to him by his correct pronouns.
Absolutely. I was in the Melanie Newman tribunal last week against the Met Police. And
can I say, which one is this? There are so many different ones, Harry.
It's a tribunal where Melanie Newman is a serving police officer saying that the Met Police are basically so steeped in the trans ideology that they refuse to take any form of complaint to get made by gender critical officers. Right. What was interesting is that one of the senior officers there reported how they were intent on investigating and sacking a police officer because they had, get this, misgendered a terrorist. They called a male terrorist a male, and this was so egregious, and it breached the terrorists' rights to be called by their adopted name. Dead naming a terrorist is terrible, and for this, they were intent on getting rid of a police officer.
But this is the thing, a lot of people don't realise that this is happening every day, and it's happening in the public sector, it's happening in the private sector, well, but the public sector in particular. The woke, diversity, equity, inclusion, trans ideology people are absolutely embedded in every single one of our public institutions, and they are driving, let's be honest, sensible, sane, honest people out.
Yeah, they absolutely are, because they've consciously got rid of the notion of serving without fear and favour. This latest report by the College of Policing, where they're wanting police officers to no longer simply be not racist, but to be anti-racist. What this does, it entirely re-engineers our judicial system. We need to be getting rid of Lady Justice, which sits atop of our court, you know, with the figure with the blindfold on. We need to get rid of that, because being blind, having blind justice, is no longer good enough. We have to have a Lady Justice with one eye open.
And this is the idea. This is the idea that, and this is part of critical race theory. It's about the whole equity issue, not equality, isn't it? So a police officer, presumably white, because they must be the ones who must be in the wrong, according to this theory, a white police officer treating a black person in the street who they say stop on searching or questioning in exactly the same way as they would treat a white suspect, that is not good enough. That in itself would be racist. They need to treat the black person in a different way, because by definition there must be racial bias, because all white people are racist. And that's the fundamental basic belief of critical race theory, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's simply not, one, it's not true. But two, it gets rid of the fundamentals of our British justice system. There's a reason that every country in the world attempts to follow our system. It's not because we always get it right in its execution, but because the model is absolutely sound. It's a model that serves without fear or favour.
Yeah, I mean, and again, all this ties in, whether it's a trans ideology, with this critical race theory, all of these things, it is. These are all from the same place. They are all, it's the same people who are pushing this. It's the same DEI people pushing this whole ideology. And again, with a hierarchy of victims and a hierarchy of the oppressors of those victims. And again, it's only when we can get things to courts, to tribunals, that we are seeing some sanity. But as with the police officers, as with you, as with so many of the people we've spoken to on the show and people representing them when it issues and things like misgendering people, by the way, it's always correctly gendering people, is the process is the punishment. 2 years of people fighting for a tribunal, people losing their jobs, people being ostracised at work. It's incredibly debilitating, and most people don't want the fight, they're not up for the fight, and they give in and they stay quiet. But we can't stay quiet on any of those things, because these ideas are deeply and demonstrably wrong.
Absolutely. What I would do is I would encourage police officers in particular, because that's my particular area of concern and expertise, to get in touch with Fair Cop. If you've made a complaint and you are not being listened to because you don't hold the correct politics, get in touch with us and we will help you. We will give you an expert witness statement.
And you're an ex-copper yourself,
Yes, absolutely, because we cannot let this happen. This is the enemy within, and we have to resist it with the same vigor and the same passion as if it was the enemy without.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, talking of the enemy without, outside the Downing Street gates, we learned, it was an amazing story in the Mail on Sunday yesterday, that back in 2020 when we had those Black Lives Matter demonstrations and protests, largely peaceful, as we were told, with people literally rioting behind the person saying this. on our streets at a time when we were in lockdown. You were not allowed to meet with more than 5 other people at the time. Certainly no major gatherings were allowed. But we saw that horrific violent scenes outside Downing Street. A woman police officer being pelted on her police horse, with staff ending up riding into a traffic light. She's suing, and it's out of her case against the Metropolitan Police for her being put in that position, that we've now learned that armoured police officers outside number 10 Downing Street, we've seen those images many times before, big burly officers complete with all security, that they were withdrawn from outside of the Downing Street gates amid concerns that they could be attacked by BLM rioters. A shot could be fired either by a police officer or their gun taken and the gun used by the rioters. This goes against every single normal policing instruction, does it not? That if the people causing a disturbance are such a threat to those armed officers, wouldn't that lead you to have more armed officers, not take them away?
Yeah, this was our version of January the 6th, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
There was a political willingness to allow this to go on. The problem we have, both with the regime, then Boris Johnson, and even more so now with Keir Starmer, is that they believe in the Black Lives Matter message.
Yeah.
So once they will make some form of a show of trying to police, show that they are policing the law and order aspect. In actual fact, they have a great deal of sympathy with the cause, and this is the reason that they behave very, very differently when it's causes which they believe in. Can you imagine if this had been a bunch of right wingers there? There would have been tanks on the streets.
Yeah. Well, we saw within weeks when there were anti-lockdown protests, completely peaceful protests, police went in with batons.
That's right. You know, they'd have brought out the water cannons, they'd have brought out the cavalry, they'd have brought out the tanks, because when it's an ideology for which they disapprove, they police in one way.
Yeah.
When it's an ideology for which they do approve, they act in an entirely different way.
And then they take the knee. We had police officers taking the knee, the way we had then Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner taking the knee.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether it's taking the Black Lives Matters, whether it's placing your police car in the colours of the trans flag and all that sort of stuff, we see you. We can tell which side of the political divide you are on. And this affects the way that you operate. It affects your decision-making process. And unfortunately, that leaves normal, reasonable people with the impression that you are policing on a two-tier agenda. You're not crazy, you are.
It's not an impression, it's the reality. We all know that's what's going on right now. Harry Miller, thank you. Always so good to talk to you, former police officer and founder of Fair Cop. Going to take a very quick break, and then I want to hear from Sam Armstrong, because there's too much there, and we're going to take your calls as well. Do get in touch, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
I heard the Chancellor answering questions from the BBC's Laura Kuenssberg on this yesterday, and I don't have anything further to add to the comments that she made.
OK. Heidi Alexander, thank you very much indeed. Secretary of State for Transport hasn't taken any free tickets. That's a good one.
This is a really, really big issue, and it goes to the heart of this government's failure to have a plan.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you so much for your company. Sam Armstrong's still with me. Before we go to calls, I do want to get your reaction. Again, talking about the nurse, know, and the misgendering. Again, not misgendering, correctly gendering somebody, perfectly politely, but just again, she wasn't even an issue for her. She just referred to this big 6-foot bloke, a convicted paedophile as Mr. Not unreasonable. And then we talk about two-tier policing, police, that even actually treating a black person and a white person the same would be racist because you have to make allowances for the institutional racism that black people have to endure in this country. I mean, it's all mad. It's just all mad, isn't it?
It is totally mad. I mean, this nurse, right, what were they discussing at the time in which she misgendered him?
His treatment.
But what specifically?
Yes.
Removing the catheter. What, from which part of the body were they removing his catheter? I'm not going to say it out loud, but we all know women don't have one of those.
I think you'll find I have to do my Monday check.
But look, this is like, the guy is a convicted paedophile. He's more than 6 foot tall. If it was me, this woman is frankly a hero of tolerance. If it was me, I would be more than prepared to offer him, as a convicted paedophile, gender-affirming surgery. Believe you me, I wouldn't be rushing to the anaesthetic before I did it either. But this is the reality, which is so many loyal, dedicated public servants just feel bullied out of the jobs. To which
And it is bullying. It is bullying. That's what it is.
We saw one over the weekend.
You will say that black is white, that up is down, that 2 + 2 = 5, or we will hound you out of your job. This is so sinister. This is so sinister.
It's more than every day, because we saw one over the weekend of somebody who posted a message calling Hamas terrorists fired from Severn Trent Water. Yep. We saw a civil servant, a scientist at Porton Down, our most secure lab in this country, bullied out of his work for politely but determinedly pointing out the fact that gender-critical beliefs, or what you and I would call common sense, are worthy of respect in a democratic society. Yeah. And the result is that millions of people in this country who believe this stuff have to hide their beliefs because they know that if they were to ever express them in the workplace, they would be bullied, they would be forced out of a job
but it's
they
happening.
love.
People say, why do you talk about this all the time? Because it's happening on such a grand scale. And it's really significant. When people are being forced to lie or pretend they believe something they don't for fear of losing their livelihood, if you don't think that's sinister, then I worry about you, frankly. I mean, it is really extraordinary. Talking of things that are sinister, lockdown and the scaring us into our homes, when again we're told constantly, a 5-year anniversary of the first official lockdown in this country yesterday, we're constantly told that we didn't know what we know now. Yeah, we did. We did. If you look back at the information that was given in those press conferences in February and early March 2020, I absolutely swear to you, there's no new information. There's nothing new about who was going to be impacted, who was at risk, what the death rate would be. No new information. Honestly, we pretty much knew everything then. Let's go to the phone lines and 0344 499 1000 is the number to call on all the topics we're talking about. And Nick is in Lincolnshire. And Nick, you want to talk about that conversation I had with Alison Pearson about that lockdown anniversary?
Yes, absolutely, and particularly the fear part. Now, a little bit of background, I was a military interrogator, so the choice of words in particular to engender fear is something that was my sort of stock in trade, if you like. I know it, I recognise it. And quite early on, one of the daily death briefings, Boris stood up, and I think the deaths had gone from like 200 to 400. They were still relatively low numbers. Yeah. And he said, but he didn't say they've gone up by 200. He said they've doubled, they've gone up 100%. And my ears pricked up, and I thought, that's not an accident. Yeah. They're deliberately, because if it goes from 1 to 2, technically that's a 100% increase.
But they still do that now. Every now and then there'll be a report on BBC, and it'll say something like, COVID cases over this last winter, COVID cases have doubled in hospitals. Do you think, and I always go and look up those figures. Yeah, well, from like 200 to 400. Yeah, I think we can live with that. There are more flu cases in hospital.
Yeah, I mean, this is how powerful fear is, though. My own mother, who's in her 70s, was at one point too scared to leave the house because she basically thought she was going to die. And I couldn't even convince her, bearing in mind she knows me and she knows my background, I still couldn't convince her not to be scared.
Yeah, I know. So many of us were. I mean, I was having everyone wiping down their phones and things. I was talking to experts about it. But, I mean, yeah, it was the point, I think, where a lot of people just went, we're done with this. But, again, what was so, I think, evil was actually to deliberately try and scare us and to keep us scared. And so many in the media as well playing along with that. That's a terrible thing. Nick, really, really interesting call. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to talk about those peace talks for Ukraine. But what hopes are there given, well, the man who is supposed to be Donald Trump's special envoy to Russia doesn't even seem to know some basic geography about Ukraine and keeps spouting Kremlin talking points. Well, we'll talk to Donald Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton, up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. 12:34 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Let's talk about whether or not we're actually going to get a chance of having a commonsensical decision when it comes to Ukraine. Will there be a ceasefire? Will there be a peace? Will there be a just peace? Well, talks are beginning once again in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia today between the Americans and the Russian envoys. Let's talk about that right now with John Bolton. He's not only a former national security advisor to Donald Trump in his first term in office, he's also a former US ambassador to the United Nations. A very good afternoon to you, John.
Glad to be with you.
Thank
Thanks
you
for having me.
so much for joining us. Basically, just as a sort of all-round general question, first of all, do you think that it is likely we will see a ceasefire deal between the Ukrainians and the Russians brokered by Donald Trump and his envoys?
Well, that may happen, but I don't think it's going to happen with anything like the speed that Trump apparently wants. I think.
Well, we're already over that deadline. It was one day, he said.
Right. Well, we're past deadlines now. I guess the latest is Trump says he'll have it by Easter. I think that's very unlikely. As I say, Putin is in no rush for a ceasefire. And frankly, neither should the Ukrainians be, because the only way to get it, I think, in Trump's mind, is for them to make even more concessions than they have already.
Well, indeed, and it is interesting the pressure that's been put on Vladimir Zelensky by Donald Trump, not just in that, I mean, I thought personally outrageous treatment of him in the Oval Office a few weeks ago, but also the pressure coming from Marco Rubio and the envoys and others, but very little pressure, it would appear, going on to Vladimir Putin. What did you make of the trip between the visit by Steve Witkoff, the US Special Envoy on behalf of Trump to the Kremlin? Not only kept waiting 8 hours, but in an interview over the weekend on Tucker Carlson, he said that, Putin's a good guy. He'd arranged for the top Russian artist to paint a portrait of Donald Trump, which he was very happy with. He talked about what sort of the eastern regions and how they would of Donbass region, how they'd have to be given away as part of his deal. But he didn't seem to know the correct names for any of them. He thought Crimea was in the east. Couldn't remember one of the names of the regions that is up for debate and has been taken over by Russian forces. Is a former golfing buddy and property developer, which is what Steve Witkoff is to the president. Is he the right man to try and broker this deal?
No, obviously he's not. What he is to Donald Trump, though, is one of Trump's rare personal friends. They're both in the real estate business, so the whole world looks to both of them like, the corner of Fifth Avenue and 57th Street in Manhattan, and whether you can get one corner or the other. It's also remarkable because it means that the key negotiator really reports directly to Trump, not the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Look, in any sensitive negotiation, a president will want to talk to the lead negotiator, and that person is obviously the one on the scene. But the reason you have a Secretary of State is to try and help keep things in a more organized system and to use the input that he and his staff can provide. That's not happening here. The input that Witkoff listens to, as we can tell from a series of interviews, including the one with Carlson over the weekend, is he listens to Putin. Yeah. There was an example of this about a week ago when Putin claimed first in a meeting with Lukashenko of Belarus that he had Ukrainian forces in Kursk surrounded and could destroy them. I don't think the White House was listening to the Lukashenko-Putin press conference, but Witkoff was in to see Putin hours thereafter. I have no doubt Putin said the same thing. I have no doubt Witkoff reported it to Trump, and that's what Trump said publicly. This kind of direct transmission line of Russian propaganda,
and it wasn't true. They were not surrounded.
Right. It was propaganda. No doubt about it. But Witkoff has said a number of other very foolish things, and so to have this completely inexperienced person, no concept of what's at stake here, but carrying out Trump's wishes. That's the other side of not having to report to Rubio. This is the ultimate example of fealty to Trump, because Witkoff has no other reason to be in this game at all, other than that he knows Trump.
And this is the concern a lot of people have who otherwise would be very supportive of a lot of things that Trump is doing, as indeed am I, on Doge, on climate change, on woke and all of these things. But on this issue, Middle East even, I'm very, very, very concerned. Who does Donald Trump listen to then? Because there is this big concern that he seems to, for some reason, be very impressed with Vladimir Putin, this strong guy thing, never met a dictator he didn't like, has he? And that he seems to be, being wound around Vladimir Putin's little finger because he's putting all the pressure on Zelensky as opposed to pressure on Vladimir Putin. And there's really no reason why Putin should come to the table other than to say, as he's done, he gets all the territory he's already got, no peacekeeping forces at all in the remaining Ukrainian, 80% of the country that remains, no NATO umbrella of security, etc., etc. I mean, Putin is basically saying the ceasefire terms I will agree is a total victory.
Yeah, I mean, the miserable performance of the Russian military is really the only thing stopping them at this point. I think Putin does not want to jeopardize the concessions that Trump has already made to him, so he'll certainly play along with this ceasefire. But if you look at the actions he's taken, even since his second call with Trump, he simply continued the offensive in Ukraine itself, and not just on the military side, but against civilian targets as well. No reason to believe that will let up. We'll see what happens in Saudi Arabia today. But I think Zelensky's in a very bad position. It's true, as you say, look, Trump thinks he and Putin are friends.
Yeah.
This is his pattern. He thinks he and Xi Jinping are friends. He said of North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, he said, we fell in love. Now, I'll guarantee that's not how the three authoritarians feel. They know exactly what they want in terms of their national interest. And I think what we've seen in the past 3 weeks is former KGB agent Vladimir Putin working his manipulation on Trump and on Witkoff and succeeding quite well, unfortunately.
Yeah, indeed. Is there a possibility that there is, method in the madness? There is a bigger picture than, we're looking at in Europe, very much focused on what's going on in Europe and the risk of Russia taking the whole of Ukraine and then moving on to Moldova, Poland, the Baltic states and others. But actually, Donald Trump and his advisors know more than us, and they're looking at the bigger global picture and their concerns over China and their concerns about Russia. Russia's alliance with China, Russia's alliance with Iran, with North Korea, and trying to bring Russia back in from the cold, and that long term that will make the world a safer place. Is there any possibility that that's what's really going on?
No.
I figured not, but I thought it was worth asking.
Sure, no harm in trying. There's no doubt China is the principal threat to the Western way of life, and by that I mean not geographically, but in terms of individual freedom, market economies, democratic societies. But what's been happening is the growth of a China-Russia axis that looks like the Sino-Soviet alliance of Cold War days, except this time China's in charge. In theory, absolutely, it should be a part of our objective to split Russia from China. Will conceding to Russia in Ukraine cause that to happen? No, it will cause Russia to grow closer to China in appreciation of all that China's done during this war, laundering Russia's sanctioned financial assets through China's system out into global markets, increasing Chinese purchases of Russian oil and gas. They're working very closely together, and surrendering all or even part of Ukraine isn't going to change that.
But hey, Putin gave Donald Trump a portrait. That's the stuff that really matters, John Bolton, surely. I mean, this is the territory we're in, isn't it? What do you make of the European efforts? Because one of the things that Donald Trump was right on in his first term and is right on now is that the Europeans need to step up and actually provide their own national and group defence. And I always agreed with him on that. Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron of France have attempted to create this coalition of the willing. It turns out they're not that willing. They don't really want to put boots on the ground. Trump has not been sort of pushing this idea, and Vladimir Putin has made it very clear any NATO country or Western country's boots on the ground he would claim to regard as a provocation in the future. We're now looking at some sort of coalition of the willing in the air rather than on the ground. Does any of this pass muster as any extra level of defence and guarantee for Ukraine in the event that there is a ceasefire?
Well, first on Europe doing more in its own defense, I think that is important. Europe made these commitments, European members of NATO, voluntarily in 2014. Many still haven't lived up to it. But what I think is crucial is the European effort be done by nation states. Yeah. The European Union thinks it's going to take on the additional role of the defense of Europe. It's going to give Donald Trump a permission slip to withdraw from NATO. And he's going to do it on the basis, well, if the Europeans don't think they need us, that's fine. Yep. The next time you're attacked by an authoritarian, militaristic government, please let us know how it turns out. Now, in terms of what's going on in peacekeeping in Ukraine, I think part of the problem with what Starmer and Macron and others have been talking about, at least as I've heard it, is they never fully agreed on what the mission is. Is the mission of the peacekeeping force to enforce the peace? That is to say, with rules of engagement that would allow them to use military force against, let's say, a Russian breach of the ceasefire? Is that what they're talking about? Yeah. Or are they talking about a more traditional UN peacekeeping force which observes and reports back to UN headquarters, and where the rules of engagement are that military force is permissible only in self-defense? I never clearly understood what they were after, but I can tell you that just confining the force to sea and air is going to delight Vladimir Putin, because his strength is on the ground. And when he recovers from the disaster in terms of casualties and expenses of this 3-year effort in Ukraine, he'll invade again. His goal is not a piece of Ukraine. His goal is the recreation of the Russian Empire, and he wants all of it.
If you were still National Security Advisor to Donald Trump, what would you be telling him to do right now?
Well, I tell him not to engage in the ceasefire discussions. This is not the time to do it. The Biden administration and NATO did a poor job in the past 3 years in the way they allocated assistance to Ukraine. We've all given a great amount. That's true, but we never gave it strategically.
Too little, too late.
Yeah, 6 months of argument on ATACMS, 6 months of argument on Abrams tanks, 3 years of argument on F-16s. That was the wrong way to do it. So the situation is not ideal. But at this point, the momentum is in Russia's favor, and that has to be stopped before you're going to get any kind of serious discussions by the Russians.
Yeah. Do you have any hopes whatsoever, just finally, that we are going to see the end of this war? Because a lot of people say, if you're not in favour of the peace talks, then you're just a warmonger.
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't know what they're talking about either. I mean, that includes Donald Trump, who says the war is senseless. The Ukrainians don't think the war is senseless. The Ukrainians are fighting for their freedom and independence. Those words should resonate with Americans. We did that once, and we didn't think it was senseless.
Absolutely. Well, we did it. We did it back in the 1940s. We didn't think it was senseless then either. John Bolton, a pleasure to have your company. Thank you so much for joining us. Former National Security Advisor to Donald Trump in his first term, former US Ambassador to the United Nations as well. Sam Armstrong still listening to that. I have to say, I've always been in agreement with John Bolton. A lot of people call him hawkish rather than dovish. Again, this idea that, well, if you don't you want peace? Well, yeah, but again, on whose terms and on what terms is what matters.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I was watching and reading about the build-up to the Second World War, and people back then were accusing the likes of Winston Churchill of being warmongers.
Yeah.
This kind of narrative, this kind of thinking has always polluted our national debate.
Yeah.
And the trouble is that those people who say we must have peace at any costs deliver precisely the opposite. Whereas those people who say we must stand up for our values, more often than not, end up producing peace. Why? Because peace comes through strength. Bad men, evil people like Vladimir Putin, they don't respect negotiations for peace.
Exactly.
He's not prepared to do a deal because of some notion he suddenly discovered of delighting in Ukrainian sovereignty. He's prepared to do a deal because he's worried about being beaten on the battlefield. If you care about the West, if you care about our values, you've got to be prepared to stand up for them.
100% with you on that. Thank you very much indeed. Up next, going to talk about this student loan fraud on a mass scale. First up, though, it's time to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning Oasis tickets at Wembley, plus £10,000 this summer. I'm afraid apparently we can't play you that right now. I do apologise for that. And instead, we'll take a quick break. We're back with you in just a couple of moments. This is Talk.
Rachel Reeves, your colleague, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, under fire today for taking some free tickets to Sabrina Carpenter's concert. Have you been in receipt of any free tickets recently?
No, I haven't.
Do you think she should have taken them?
So I heard the Chancellor answering questions from the BBC's Laura Kuenssberg on this yesterday, and I don't have anything further to add to the comments that she made.
OK. Heidi Alexander, thank you very much indeed. Secretary of State for Transport hasn't taken any free tickets. That's a good one.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:51 is the time. Now, I'm certainly looking at this. I'm sure you've looked at it yourself, or whether you're a parent looking at it for your children. Student loans, huge cost. You take out these loans of over £9,000 per year for their tuition fees, and then at some point you've got to pay it back. Well, an awful lot of people don't pay it back. In particular, people who come from abroad tend not to pay those student loans back. But don't worry, taxpayer picks up the bill for that. Well, we are apparently picking up the bill for hundreds of millions. I think it's probably going to be at that level of fraud in student loans being claimed by people with no intent to study and no intent to pay the money back. This has been exposed by the Sunday Times. They found evidence of people enrolling on degree courses, often at very small colleges, where they basically get access to a loan. They've got no intention of paying back. They've got no intention of doing any studying. They get like £4,000 to sort of start off with at the very least. And then they drop out, and then they start again a year later taking out yet another loan. Well, the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson's finally doing something useful instead of ruining our schools, and she's asked counter-fraud experts to lead an investigation into reports that millions of these loans have been claimed by people with no intent to study. Well, let's talk to Josh Freeman about this. He's policy manager at the Higher Education Policy Institute. Very good afternoon to you, Josh.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us. Now, I mean, the figures on this are extraordinary because these loans, I mean, doesn't feel like enough to cover the fees when people take them out in this country, but actually they cost us an awful lot, and a huge number of these loans are never paid back, even by people who in full here in Britain. But when people come from abroad, there's pretty much no way of getting that money back, and for some reason we let these people get these loans. But in particular, huge numbers of people are coming from Romania to study on courses. Often they're people who can't even speak adequate English, who are rolling at a course, taking out a massive loan and then disappearing. What on earth is going on, and how is this allowed to happen?
Yes, you're absolutely right. It is extraordinary. And the issue I think we're seeing is with something called franchise provision. Now this is where an established university allows some other provider, like a college, to run its degrees, to teach its degrees. Now, the amount of franchise provision has absolutely exploded. It has doubled from 2018 to 2022. And this is where we're starting to see the problem. Now, there's lots of benefits of franchise provision. For example, you've got sort of NHS trusts that are running specialist courses through there. You've got new providers that are starting out as franchises, then becoming established universities. All of that's great, but you're starting to see sometimes that relationship with the university and the franchisee is not working. It's being abused.
Well, indeed. And again, on a grand scale, look, for years we've had people who've coming in claiming to be migrants and actually enrolling at school, living hundreds of miles away, clearly not there. But now they're getting loans as well. So they're on dodgy student visas, but getting loans as well is even worse. But I mean, the Student Loans Company identified 3,500 suspicious loan applications in 22-23, totaling almost 60 million quid. But recent investigations by the Sunday Times suggest way higher as the potential fraud. They reckon it could run into hundreds of millions of pounds. They've got at least 6 franchise providers where they think fraudulent claims are off the scale. One franchise college made £234 million in revenue last year, increasing their profits by more than 1,200% in just 3 years. I mean, that alone would be, I wonder what they are doing. Some universities have got up to half of their applicants last year were Romanian. Huge number of the people with these questionable loans are from Romania. Suddenly we are appealing massively to another part of the world that we didn't think was a big source of our students. Look, the thing about this is there are always going to be people on the make and on the take. We know that. It's the fact that these loans are being handed out so willy-nilly, and if they're not going to be paid back, the taxpayer pays them back. We end up footing the bill, don't we?
Right. And what you're seeing is a system that doesn't work, a funding system that doesn't really work. You've got institutions that are really struggling for funding, a number of universities that are on the brink of serious financial trouble, scrabbling around for ways of funding themselves. Franchise provision has become a key way, as you've just mentioned. It's quite easy to get funding for students, lots of funding by not doing very much. And as a result of that level of use of franchising has exploded. Now, I said we shouldn't, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We need to keep the best of franchising. It's useful for the ways I mentioned, but it's right that we regulate this properly. And the Secretary of State, to her credit, has said, already we're going to actually, even before these revelations, we were going to have some new regulations, some new proposals, to regulate franchising. That's very good. Now we need some more, and hopefully the government.
But it's bad enough that people are coming in on a student visa and not actually, and actually are working rather than just being students. I'm not quite sure why somebody who doesn't speak English turning up in this country to pay for college, go to a college. I'm not quite sure why that's supposed to be of a benefit to us. They're still needing housing. They're not going to be on a high income. They're not paying tax. They're no use to us at all. But if you're going to be some top sort of engineering student, we might get to keep you here and you'll be a fantastic asset to the country. Bring it on. But if you don't even speak English, when it's the second language of pretty much the entire world now, that's a bit telling already. But I don't know, the thing that utterly flummoxed me, why on earth are we giving British student loans to foreigners?
Well, so this is an interesting point, and I don't know how many international students shouldn't be receiving student loans. These are
well, it looks like an awful lot of them are.
For British students, but you're right, and I think these are students that are. I'm not sure exactly the detail that you mentioned, but I think these are students that have been resident in the UK for quite a while, which is why they are eligible for these international student loans. But you are absolutely right that the number of international students has increased by a lot, and the reason for this is the financial troubles that I was mentioning.
Yeah.
Universities can charge enormous amounts of money to international students, £20,000, £25,000, £30,000 a year to international students. And so in some cases, and I don't know how widespread this is, I think it's, hopefully it's relatively narrow, but there are some cases where international students are being taken on possibly without properly making sure they have the right English language skills. I think we need to make sure, and we need to make sure we address this, because it's affecting the reputation of the whole sector, the vast majority of universities, taking new students in very legitimate ways, but it's affecting the sector's reputation.
Absolutely. The thing is, they just want the free money, don't they, the colleges? And they're not having to provide any lessons. They can still carry on working from home and then go on strike demanding a pay rise. Usual form. Josh Freeman from the Higher Education Policy Institute. Very quick word from Sam Armstrong. I mean, this has been going on, different versions of this have been going on for a very long time, but this is the taxpayer. It's going to be massively out of pocket.
Yeah, and it's a total and utter racket. I don't think that anybody coming from any country other than this should be in receipt of British taxpayer funds in order to fund...
Just don't even understand why anyone thinks they should.
We keep getting told that universities are good for the economy. That's why we've got to keep importing so many people. They'd never told us before that we were paying for the privilege of having them to come here.
But also, if you don't even speak English when you come here, I mean, realistically, how much benefit are you bringing to us? Really? Absolutely extraordinary. Oh, I don't know. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe we paid for the education for this one. Ian Collins is here. Hello.
I love it.
We're old enough. I didn't get a loan. I was old enough. I was on a full grant.
It's all free stuff. But I love giving money away to, I don't...
Random foreigners?
I don't sleep straight unless I think I've given a few quid to some Spaniards who want to come over